Right, good morning, everyone. We are ready to go. Thank you very much, Wendy and Debbie. Okay, there's no fire alarm anticipated today, so if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building through the nearest fire exit by following the running man signs above the doors and make your way to the rear of the car park. The organiser of the meeting will tell you when it's safe to return. Toilets are available in the stairwell of the building at each floor landing. Water is available from the water cooler in reception. And finally, please make sure all phones are either muted or switched off. Good morning. I am the Chair, Councillor Ollie Davey, and welcome to this Planning Committee meeting on Tuesday, 28th of January 2025. Before I start the meeting, I need to appoint a Vice Chair, as Councillor Matt Hall has given his apologies for today's meeting. So with members' agreement, I'd like to appoint Councillor Mike Howe. If members are in agreement, please raise your hand. It looks like it's unanimous.
I'm giving up trying to convince them otherwise.
Yeah. Okay. Supporting officers present today are Wendy Ormsby, Development Manager, Damien Hunter, Planning Solicitor, and Wendy Harris, Democratic Services Officer. And the presenting officers for today's applications will be Jill Hemsworth, Charlie McCulloch, Andrew Digby, and Liam Fisher. The meeting today is being streamed live to the Council's YouTube account, so can I remind all members and officers contributing to the meeting to use a microphone or your comments will not be heard. We'll now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members and declarations of interest. And I'll do it when you call my name.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. So I'll start with yourself, Chair, Councillor Ollie Davey.
Present. And I think on behalf of all members, I can say we've been lobbied on behalf of agenda item 8, planning application 241174 MFUL and 241175 LBC. Okay.
Thank you. Vice Chair, Councillor Mike Howe.
I'm here and no other declarations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brian Bailey.
Present, Wendy, and no declarations.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Barlow.
Present and no other declarations.
Thank you. Councillor Kim Bloxham.
Present and no other declarations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Colin Brown.
Present and no other declarations.
Thank you. Councillor Jenny Brown.
Present, no other declarations.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Faithful.
Present, no other declarations.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Gazzard.
Present and no other declarations.
Thank you. Do we have Councillor Del Haggerty? I know he was. Oh, hello.
Present and no other declarations. Thank you.
Councillor Simon Smith.
Present and no declarations.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Eileen Ragg.
Present, no declaration.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, agenda item 1 is registered speakers, and the list for today's planning applications can be found on page 4 and 5 of the agenda. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. Is it members' wish that as the Chair I sign the minutes of the meetings held on 17th December 2024 as a true and accurate record? Any comments on those? All in favour then? Any against or abstentions? No? Good. Okay, I will sign those. Agenda item 3 is apologies.
Yes, we've received 3 apologies. Councillor Matt Hall, Councillor Anne Hall and Councillor Maddie Chapman.
And Councillor Sarah Chamberlain.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest we've done. Agenda item 5, matters of urgency. There are none. Agenda item 6, to agree any items to be dealt with after the public have been excluded. There are none of those either. And so agenda item 7, planning appeals statistics, pages 10 to 28 on your agenda. We have an update from Mrs. Ormsby, Development Manager. Thank you, Wendy.
Good morning. My only comment is really just that the information be noted. I think with the intervening of Christmas, we haven't had so many decisions coming out. There's only 2 appeal decisions have been issued since last planning committee, and none of those require any specific comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We had a little slew of them yesterday, I think, didn't we? A little list of appeals that had been determined. Okay, in that case, we can move on to agenda item 8. Planning application 241174 MFUL and 241175 LBC. This is the Richmond Hotel, Elysian Fields, Sidmouth. Pages 29 to 64 of your agenda. And Planning Officer Jill Himsworth is going to present the report. Over to you, Jill.
Thank you very much. So the application site is the Sidholm Hotel, which is just under 1 kilometre north of the seafront in Sidmouth. The building is Grade 2 star listed, so to put that into some context in terms of listed building, that puts it in the top 2.5% of all listed buildings in England. The site is within the Elysian Fields Conservation Area in Sidmouth. The former owner went into receivership in 2021, and the site was subsequently purchased by the applicant. To give some background to the hotel, it was originally constructed as 2 separate dwellings. So Richmond House, this part in the centre here, was constructed in 1832. It's a substantial Gothic villa, which was part of a planned residential development known as Elysian Fields. And then Cumberland House, the other villa to the east of the site, were both built in the cottage ornate tradition, overlooking the Sidmouth vista to the south. So the overall development of Grand Villas was known as Elysian Fields and formed a significant part of the conservation area. The ballroom, or the music room to the north of the site, was constructed by the 6th Earl of Buckinghamshire during the early 1800s, and Cumberland House was incorporated into the house to form a grand stately home. The annex to the north, that's this building up here, was built by the engineer Lindemann, who was later a scientific advisor to Winston Churchill during World War II. The site was bought by the Methodist Guild in the 1930s and was used as a hotel until 2020. It is recognised that the Grade 2 star listed house requires significant conservation to secure the future of the house and the wider site. So in terms of the details of the proposal, the applicant states that the site is no longer viable as a hotel, and therefore permission is sought to redevelop the site to provide leasehold accommodation. The retained portion of the hotel would be used as a commercial wedding and music venue, but full details of that part of the site have not been included within this submission. There are 4 townhouses here, which were previously approved for development as enabling development to help pay for the refurbishment works of the hotel in 2023. The applicant states that those cannot be started currently as there are insufficient funds available. Therefore, the timetable previously agreed in the Conservation Management Plan has not been adhered to. The applicant states that the separate leasehold dwellings would support the retained portion of the listed building through the dwelling's contribution to the overall site maintenance charges and payment of their own council tax and utility costs. Looking at the application in more detail, so the Cumberland wing to the east of the site is proposed as being changed into 4 separate dwellings. The guest house cottage here, which is currently used as hotel rooms, is proposed as being changed into another dwelling. The staff cottage over here, below the approved townhouses, is proposed as being turned into another dwelling. The Lindemann building has already been converted into 6 separate apartments under a 2021 planning and listed building consent, and the work has been undertaken. So permission is sought to use these as holiday lets. And the existing manager's bungalow, which dates from the 1990s, has also been refurbished, and permission is sought to sell that as a separate leasehold dwelling. So in total, there's 13 dwellings across the site, with the rest of the hotel being retained as a wedding and music venue. So this is the existing ground floor plan showing the layout of the hotel as approved under the 2021 planning and listed building consent application. So here's the music room and the billiard room, which are both very architecturally significant, as with the rest of Richmond House. And then the Cumberland wing, which is proposed for change of use, is this section over here to the east, along with the guest house cottage here. And here is the existing first floor layout as approved under the 2021 full and listed building consent planning application. So the proposed conversion of the Cumberland wing and the guest house, together with the works already approved to the hotel, would mean the hotel would have 14 bedrooms remaining on the site, as well as the 13 dwellings. These are more detailed plans showing the works proposed to the Cumberland wing. So these are the existing floor plans. You can see the central section there, that's the original earliest portion of the Cumberland House there. And these later additions, this part of the front is the most recent, dating from the 1980s. So, and these are the proposed plans showing the proposed alterations to the Cumberland wing to enable the changes to the dwellings. So Cumberland Cottage, this part in the central, it's got its original Georgian staircase, and that would be retained in the works. Though this would provide a 3-bedroom house with an area of 164 square metres. Cottage 1 over here would have the stair retained. Both the ground floor and first floor would be reconfigured to provide a 2-bedroom house, 92 square metres. Richmond Cottage is the modern 1980s section at the front here, would be renovated to provide a 2-bedroom cottage with an area of 177 square metres. Cottage 3 is a 3-storey house, would be reconfigured to provide a 3-bedroom house. And the guest house, which is shown here, would be reconfigured at ground floor and first floor level to provide a 3-bedroom house of 146 square metres. No floor plans or elevations have been submitted of the staff cottage, which sits more or less here in relation to cottage 1. So looking at some photographs of the site, this is the north elevation of the Cumberland wing. This is the staff cottage. So planning consent and listed building consent was approved to remove this modern extension, leaving the staff cottage behind. But no plans or elevations of that building have been submitted with this application. These are the approved plans of the Lindemann wing, which has already been approved and the work has been carried out. Permission is sought for leasehold use for holiday accommodation only, recognising that the area of the apartments falls below the national minimum space standards, with the exception of 1 apartment. So these would be for holiday use only. And that's a photograph showing the Lindemann wing to the north of the hotel site. In the background there is the manager's bungalow, which again, we don't have any floor plans as part of the application. And that's a photograph showing a typical interior of the Lindemann wing. It's been refurbished to a high standard. So there are a number of issues with the application. This is a photograph taken from the south of the site. So this is the Cumberland Wing here and the modern 1980s section at the front of the site. There is an in-principle objection to the loss of the site for holiday accommodation, which would be contrary to local plan policy E18. There is no evidence provided to support the claim that there's no longer a need for the hotel use on the site. The previous owner did go into receivership, but the hotel made a small profit in the last 3 years of its operation. And it is considered that protecting the tourist use is more important than providing residential accommodation on the site. There's also a significant objection to the proposals in terms of the heritage aspects of the scheme. In terms of the listed building, the local planning authority must have special regard to the desirability of preserving the building's special interest. The National Planning Policy Framework makes it clear that proposals must be submitted with clear and convincing justification. The house has a very high level of architectural interest. It has exceptionally well preserved internal spaces. It has historic interest. It tells us of the lives of the former owners. It offers insights into the conspicuous consumption practices of mid-19th century elites. The proposed subdivision of the house into residential accommodation and a separate hotel would introduce a high degree of fragmentation, which would affect the integrity and authenticity of the heritage asset. The application, as presented, seeks to convert the most readily adaptable part of the site and sell the houses, and offers no guarantee that the music room and the rest of the hotel would be converted. And the application lacks detail on how the subdivision of the properties and the landscape would be implemented. Historic England have suggested a feasibility be undertaken by the applicant to explore other uses for the building. Planning practice guidance states that the optimum viable use is the one likely to cause the least harm to the significance of the asset, and states that the optimum viable use may not necessarily be the most economically viable use. And any works proposed should be the minimum necessary to secure the future of the site. No other options have been put forward for the site by the applicant. They've cited other examples in Sidmouth of the Harbour Hotel and the Victoria Hotel as precedents for hotels where adjacent housing has been used to help pay for works to refurbish existing hotel buildings. Neither of these buildings are listed, however, and in both of these cases, the proposal didn't seek to remove the hotel accommodation. It sought to augment the accommodation provided in much the same way that the townhouse applications approved in 2023 would have done on this site. The options put forward in terms of the use of the dwellings, in terms of whether they're holiday use or permanent residential use, are all centred around reducing the funding commitments to the building rather than reducing the harm to the building. The applicants have submitted a phasing plan in terms of how the works would proceed. This puts the swimming pool refurbishment ahead of any refurbishment to the music and billiard room. The previous conservation management plan committed to retaining the site as a single asset. We now have a revised conservation management plan. There are no detailed timescales proposed and no heads of terms to ensure that the proposal would actually lead to the full refurbishment and reopening of the venue. So these are the existing elevations of the Cumberland Wing. And the proposed elevations. So the elevations obviously lack the details of the existing and proposed windows and doors. Generally, the submission lacks details in terms of the repair methodology, and no drawings have been provided regarding things like proposed replacement floorboards, any wall linings, ceiling repairs, a replacement, internal joinery details such as doors, staircases, skirtings, etc. we don't have any details of any thermal or acoustic upgrades proposed to the external fabric or any fire separation. There are no floor plans or elevations of the staff cottage. There are no elevations of the western end of the cottage 3 or the southern elevation of the guest house cottage. There's no information regarding servicing, any electric metering, extract vents, or the impact that inserting these elements would have upon the significance of the building. There's no condition survey provided of the building. Costs have been provided by the applicant, but given the lack of the survey and the lack of drawn information, these cannot be relied on in terms of accuracy. Historic England have stated that the risk of the fragmentation of the site is a huge concern. The application would provide limited benefits in terms of the small increase of housing within Sidmouth, but is not considered that this would outweigh the resulting isolation of the most sensitive part of the site, which could increase the challenges that this might face in identifying a sustainable medium to long-term future for the building. The MPPF requires great weight to be given to an asset's conservation, and the greater the significance of the asset, the greater that weight should be. Therefore, it is considered that the proposal would be contrary to the MPPF and to local plan policies EN8 and EN9. As well as the concerns over the heritage, there's also significant concerns regarding the residential amenity of the proposal and the practicalities of having residential accommodation immediately next door to a proposed music and wedding venue. This would leave the commercial scheme surrounded by residential accommodation. The plans indicate there would be overlooking between cottage 3 and the guest house cottage, with only 5 metres between these dwellings, and that's the only windows to the living spaces of cottage 3. This relatively tight space also provides the only servicing route into the commercial kitchen of the commercial venue, and the applicants have pointed out there is an alternative route, but this goes across the formal lawns of the hotel, which in likelihood wouldn't be used during a wedding. There's no delineation provided between the residential parts of the garden and the commercial garden, therefore there would be conflict over who would have priority during events. However, it would not be desirable to make any delineation between the garden in terms of the heritage aspects and the completeness of the garden at present. There's a roof terrace up here from Richmond Cottage, which would lead to direct overlooking to the cottage 3 behind. The applicants have stated this wouldn't be used as a roof terrace, but the application's drawings still show a door out from this building onto this roof terrace. And there are also significant concerns in terms of the residential amenity of the house immediately next door to the billiard room and the noise implications of having 30 weddings and 30 music events a year immediately next door to a residential dwelling. So the impact of the residential amenity gives rise to another reason for refusal. The above drawing is the proposed parking layout for the Cumberland Wing dwellings. These spaces are not to scale. The spaces would not fit as shown, and there's inadequate space for turning between these buildings. There's just 7.5 metres between the staff cottage and the Cumberland Wing. So there's just not space to fit the spaces in as proposed. There's no information given in terms of the parking spaces for the rest of the site, so no information regarding whether there would be enough spaces left for the rest of the commercial venue, and no information regarding the number of spaces for the annex apartments and for the manager's cottage. Highways have no objections to the scheme, as they state the trip generation would be similar to the existing use, but in terms of the parking for the residential elements, insufficient information has been given with the application. So here's just a few more photos looking around the site. This is the north wing of the Cumberland Wing. So this is the limited space between cottage 3 and the guest house cottage. So there's just 5 metres between these apartments. These are the only windows from the living space of cottage 3. So this is quite constrained, and this is the only route through to the commercial kitchen between these dwellings. So there's a conflict there in terms of residential amenity. And this is the interior of Cumberland House. So as I said previously, we've no drawings in terms of the proposed refurbishment of this, in terms of the floorboards, things like ceiling repairs, window repairs, proposed joinery, any thermal or acoustic upgrades, and any services installations to assess the impact upon the heritage asset. And here's a picture of the photograph of the music room. So looking briefly at other matters within the application, as the application is for 10 or more housing, strategy 34 in terms of affordable housing would apply to the site. Obviously, it would be inappropriate to provide affordable housing on the site, therefore a contribution would be made. In all likelihood, it seems that the site would not support affordable housing contributions, and vacant building credit would probably also apply to the site, but no information has been provided by the applicant in respect of any of these issues. We have not been given any ecology information in respect to the site. The change of use would involve various works within the roof in terms of fire and acoustic separation. The existing roof is in a poor condition with various gaps and openings, and the site is surrounded by woodland. Therefore, it's considered the proposal could lead to adverse impacts to protected species. In terms of biodiversity and net gain, insufficient information has been submitted in terms of a detailed site plan showing hard and soft landscaping to demonstrate that the site would benefit from the de minimis exemption. And in terms of the appropriate assessment, habitat mitigation contributions have only been received in respect of 11 dwellings, whereas there's 13 dwellings proposed at the site. So to conclude, insufficient evidence has been provided that the proposed works are the minimum necessary to secure the future of the site, and the proposal provides no guarantee that the revenue generated from the development would be used to refurbish the remaining portion of the hotel. Any funds generated through enabling development are provided to directly solve the conservation needs of the place, not to solve the financial needs of the present owner. The proposal would impact upon the integrity and authenticity of the heritage asset, and the division of the site would be contrary to the previously undertaken conservation management plan. The proposal would lead to the permanent and irreversible fragmentation of the site and potentially leave the most significant part of the building without a future use, and would increase the challenges it would face in identifying a sustainable medium to long-term future. In the absence of significant public benefits to outweigh the identified harm, the scheme is recommended for refusal. And in addition, Historic England have commented that if the local planning authority is minded to grant consent for the listed building consent application in its current form, in light of their objection, the Secretary of State should be notified of the LBC application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jill. It's very clear, and thank you very much for taking that kind of point by point. Okay, we'll go on to public speakers. We have a supporter, Maureen Cook. You have 3 minutes. Yeah, if you'd like to come up to the lectern there and press the, I think either button will do, Wendy. Yeah, there we go. You're on.
Right. Good morning, everybody. I live in the Laurels, which is a set of apartments adjacent to the Sithole building and was built on part of the grounds. So we are very close to it, and it's very dear to our heart, actually. Many of us walk past it every single day and have been really quite concerned about the fact that it is deteriorating, and we think it's urgent that something is dealt with very quickly. We have attended two public meetings, which the applicants called, to tell us all about their proposals and ask for comments and suggestions. They were very, very well supported. We all felt that this at least was going to be something which would produce a pleasant area, make it much better. So really and truly, we do generally in the area, we support the proposals. In particular, we think that the community amenity will be very good indeed, because they intend to keep the music room for public use. The Friends of the Sidholm Music Room spent a lot of time and money in raising the money for the improvement of the organ and the beautiful chandeliers. We had wonderful concerts there every Sunday afternoon, which helped to raise the money. And we really think this is something that might get it going again. We would like to say that everybody in the area, particularly that I've spoken to, fully support the proposal that something must be done before the building itself becomes derelict. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Suzanne Jenkins on behalf of Richmond Estates Sidmouth Limited. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Mel and I find ourselves between a rock and a very hard place. We have spent the past year trying to find a solution for the £4.5 million that needs to be spent on this building to repair the years of neglect that it has suffered. It is now in a perilous predicament because dry rot, untreated woodworm, leaks from the roof and damp ingress are taking hold. The planning officer's own photographs show that quite clearly. We've explored every option that we could feasibly conceive for the building, but none can provide the funding that it needs. We were laughed at when we applied for grants. We consider this application to be a last chance for the building before the repairs become even more uneconomical. From the beginning, we have said that we have no objection to a set of conditions that mandate repairs alongside sales. We actively encourage this because we're not applying for this permission in order to make a profit. The only chance we have of any profit would be to make the venue thrive, which is what everyone wants for the building, as the lady just said. We have a petition also from the members of the public, 63 signatures in support. The planning officer's comments therefore make very hard reading for us. We understand that she, along with Heritage England, feel the need to protect the history of the building, but our heritage consultants feel that this is what we're actually doing. Their report says our application meets all the relevant MPPF policies because we're not causing harm to the historically important, we're not changing the outside, we're not changing the insides of either listed building, other to put them back to their original state and reversing the butchery performed by the Methodist Guild. The schedule of work that I submitted details every bit of what we're planning to do, from the window restorations to what plaster, to how we're going to thermally upgrade within listed building constraints. The planning officer says this information is lacking. It has been submitted in great detail. We've been guided by the ill-conceived conservation management plan. It was agreed in a highly optimistic and poorly researched fashion. No checks were made about whether the plan could actually work or the money was there to do it. Hence, we're now in this predicament. The use of the building as palatial accommodation, wedding and music venue was agreed. We're doing everything in our power to do this. Why is the planning officer disagreeing with an already agreed use? Other than restoring Cumberland Cottage to its original residential layout, the remaining areas that we've asked to change to residential are very poor quality infill buildings and extensions, used as low quality hotel rooms, kitchens and storage. There is no way that any of this space could be transformed into palatial accommodation. The rooms are too bitty, small, and for fire regulations need escape routes that then make them even smaller. Residential use removes the need for these fire escape routes. Therefore, the accommodation becomes more suitable. The bungalow and staff cottage already have residential permission, which is why we say less properties than the planning officer says. All of our financial investigations have shown that in the current economic climate, to try to start up a 50-bedroom hotel requiring full-time staff, huge overheads, and what would be immense debt is a recipe for failure. Our local MP raised this predicament faced by local hotels in Parliament last year, as reported by Hansard. We cannot raise the money for the work when all logic points to failure. Our application allows us to borrow the money to restore the building and then pay it back later by leasehold selling areas that make good houses but awful hotel rooms. There are several comments in the planning officer's statement that I disagree with. Cottage 3 does not lack light. The proposed living room has over 3 metre tall ceilings with sash windows all the way up. The other rooms all have unrestricted windows. The overlooking discussed from Cottage 3 and the 1987 extension proposed as Richmond Cottage is an existing narrowly fenced fire escape, not a terrace. The drawing was represented to reflect this incorrect labelling, and building regs would probably allow us to remove the fire escape for a residential dwelling. It wouldn't be needed in the same way as it is in hotel. The billiards room is to be restored but not offered to the weddings. Thus is a buffer. We feel it is too historically important to be used as a public room for weddings. Why do we need ecological reports, landscaping information, etc.? The roof work is repairs and already agreed. The separating structures are clearly discussed in my schedule of works and are existing gable end walls. We do not need to build structures within the roof, they pre-exist. The parking is already there, delineated outside our proposed cottages as part of the hotel offering. We've shown an indicative plan and suggested that final layout be a condition to be finally approved once the staff cottage extension has been demolished. Our planning for those works has a condition to be discharged about where the front door is located, which will therefore affect how our parking is laid out. Our historical report clearly discusses how our proposal is within MPPF policies, contradicting the planning officer's statement. How can loss of holiday accommodation apply when the hotel has been closed for 5 years? We're doing the opposite. We're enabling it to be brought back into use. Yes, there will be less rooms, but it will promote year-round occupancies in the rest of Sidmouth from guests at our events.
I'm going to have to ask you to wind up fairly soon, please.
One more paragraph.
Okay.
This can only be a benefit to the local community businesses. In conclusion, we ask that you grant us conditional approval, subject to the creation of a unilateral agreement that ensures work is promptly and properly completed to the existing building, so that it is protected from its current owner who's already broken such an agreement and does not affect proper repairs. Planning consent will allow us to borrow the necessary funds to protect the building, and we found no other way to do so. And in conclusion, I mentioned before that I have a lot of public support as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Well, you've had a good hearing because you've had nearly double your time. If you would mind just switching the microphone off there. Thank you. Okay, we move on to questions. I'll just start with one. Obviously, we've looked into this question of whether we could condition the link between the refurbishment of the hotel and the works that are being proposed through this application. Is there any way that you feel it could be conditioned, or an agreement, an S106 or a memorandum of understanding or something like that? I presume you've looked into all that.
So I think in terms of the information presented, as well as agreeing the timescale, we'd also need information to prove that the works was the minimum necessary to secure the future of the heritage asset. And I don't think on the basis of the information we've presented so far that we could say that it was. And in terms of the timings and the costings of the work, I don't think we've got sufficient information to say that with certainty that elements could be undertaken, that such a plan could be adhered to, if that makes sense.
So we can condition things like finishes and things like that, but we can't condition further information that's actually required, can we? Is that what you're saying? That we can't proceed without that further information?
I mean, we don't really know what's going to happen in the rest of the main house. I mean, the application says it's going to be a music and wedding venue, but we don't really have the details of that, other than the design and access statement refers to having a wedding 30 weeks of the year and a music event 30 weeks of the year. Yeah, so I think based on the information we've got, it would be very difficult. We could do that if we had more information, but there still remains the concern over the fragmentation of the site and the residential use next to a music and wedding venue and the practicalities of that.
Okay, no, I'm sorry, we can only take questions from members of the committee. So I'll start with Councillor Barlow.
Councillor Faithfull, second, yeah.
Okay, and you are the ward member, Ian, so we'll hear from you first.
It's just a question at this point. Historic England have said that if we were to pass this, we've got to put it up to the Secretary of State. I've been on planning for 13 years, only in the Town Council. I've been on here too. I've never had a note from Historic England so straightforward, basically, of saying no. I mean, is that a normal thing? Is that happened before, or is that unusual?
I think it's unusual, and I think it shows the strength of their feeling that the proposal here, it is irreversible, and it would lead to the permanent fragmentation of this asset. And as I said in the report, it's grade 2 star listed, which puts it in the top 2.5% of assets. So we would be effectively splitting it into the different parts, which would affect its integrity and its authenticity and the way in which the asset is understood.
Thank you. Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if this is a bit premature, but whether we maybe put a pause on this and ask them to bring back the information they've been asked for, and then rather than drag this out too long today.
So, so the application has already been deferred from committee once already. We met with the applicants, the Conservation Officer and I, and Historic England met with the applicants back in November to discuss with them what would be needed in terms of additional financial information, additional drawn information. We have received a schedule of works which has got some more information in it, but in terms of drawn information, we don't have anything as a kind of mechanism to approve the scheme. And it still remains the case that Historic England have asked for a feasibility study to explore other uses for the site. That hasn't been done. The applicants have undertaken a feasibility study after that meeting with Historic England, and again it says that this is the only option for the site. No other options have been explored. So I think we have been quite clear with the applicant that the information submitted isn't sufficient to demonstrate that these works are the minimum necessary to secure the future of the heritage asset. They are aware of that, and we haven't received any information that would Historic England have not removed their objection based on the information subsequently submitted since the application was deferred from the last committee.
Thank you. Councillor Jenny Brown.
Thank you. On the pictures, you've got a picture of scaffolding outside a building and then the internal of a room that's been ripped out. Which part of the hotel is that? Which planning application relates to that bit? Because that seems pretty extreme, the work's going on in that room.
So this is works to the Cumberland wing, so this is the east wing. So this is a photograph of the main reception room in Cumberland House. So I believe this work is being done under the 2021 application to repair the building. So that allowed for repair, but not for the changes to the layout of the building.
Right, and you said that the previous people that owned it, the Christian Guild or Methodist Guild, they actually were making a profit in the last 3 years. I do know the company because I used to stay in hotels with my mother, and they're pretty cheap. So if they're still making a profit when they're cheap.
They did, yeah. The financial statement submitted by the applicant showed that they did make a small profit in 2017, 2018 and 2019, and obviously at the start of 2020 they closed because of COVID.
Councillor Howe.
I just want to clarify, on page 43 it shows 4 options having been provided of ways forward, of which only one obviously is shown as, and I thought you said only one had been provided, but there is clearly in the report 3. Now I'm not totally convinced about the 3 options, I must admit, but that's separate to what you've just said, and I just want to make sure we're being straight, if you get my meaning.
I think in terms of the options presented in the committee report, they relate to the same use. The options are in terms of whether the dwellings are used as permanent residential dwellings or whether they are short-term holiday lets. I think Historic England were looking for something more holistic that would look at the site in a more from the context of the whole site, looking at other uses. I think they wouldn't rule out the possibility of other enabling development elsewhere in the site that would allow the hotel to retain as a single element. There's other areas of the site that are not so significant that wouldn't have such an impact upon the hotel as this application is doing, which is basically splitting it into two separate uses. And none of that has been explored by the applicant.
Councillor Barlow.
Sorry, again, just on that point, I presume, you know, that I think everyone in Sidmouth would like something done with this. I don't think there's a single person in Sidmouth that doesn't have sympathy and wants something done with this. I presume that has been explained by Historic England when they were there to the applicant, that the other options that might be available to them, sort of thing, that they should look at first. I mean, I notice in their letter that it says we suggest starting from scratch, but obviously that's a big thing to do. But you know, it's been made very clear to them, has it, that there are other options, that this isn't the only one.
It has been made clear in that meeting, and the applicant also undertook pre-application advice with Historic England before this planning application was made, so they are clear on that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions before we go into debate? No. Okay, we'll go into debate then. Councillor Barlow.
Well, look, I've been involved in this for a long, long time when I sat on Sidmouth Planning. And Sidmouth Town Council has always been very, very supportive. We were very excited when this was going to be a hotel, mainly to begin with at the start. We supported them with the coach house when that was being, the garages when they were being changed so that it could afford to do the rest of it, etc. But even Sidmouth, they turned around at the end and said, it's a step too far when they read the bits from Historic England and your comments. And it seemed that there's just so many ifs and buts in there of this belief that this hotel can, the wedding venue can make £840,000 a year. You know, and the problems that would be caused by residential properties next to a wedding venue, we weren't convinced that it was not going to cause an awful lot of problems in the future. Of, you know, if you're having 35 wedding venues with lots of houses nearby, who's going to pay for it? So I'm just surprised that this has come to committee when the town council didn't support this. I know you say the reason that it came forward to this committee is because it was supported, but I mean, I think it was fairly clear from the town council it wasn't supported, and I'm surprised it's here. You know, looking at Historic England, I've always said, you know, buying a listed building is one thing. It's a very brave thing to do. Buying a Grade 2 star listed building is a biblically brave thing to do because it demands such care, and because of the 2.5% of, you know, the top 2.5%, and I think, you know, you know, much as I have sympathy, we can't go against the advice of not only our officers, which sometimes it has been known that we do, but to go then against Historic England, who are, you know, the experts and the final say, when they are so adamant in their letter. I at the present time, from what I've heard, could not support this however much sympathy I've got with the owner and the ladies that are trying to do this, and I just think that we are almost wasting our time discussing this. As it was said, if we can't put this out and say that you know, we can go back for more information or more detail or give them another chance. But, you know, from what Historic England and yourself are saying, that something fundamentally different needs to be done, it's not something that we could condition because it's got to be changed. And, you know, sad as it is, and I know it's not going to be popular because, as I said, everyone, I think there's a single person in Plymouth that doesn't want to see this saved and improved. But this isn't the way to do it, from what I can see of what I've heard so far. What is it? Caveat emptor, buyer beware. And
We're trying to raise the funds to buy it, to save the building. That's the whole point. The current owner will sit and let it fall down.
And
Condemning it to that future.
and
Mr. Barlow, you know that.
Yeah, I have to ask you not
And as I said,
I
I
understand
realise-
the temptation, but
I realise that it's not popular, but just because it's not popular doesn't mean it's right. And I think in this occasion, you know, I just think that it needs to be relooked at by them to come back to it. So I will wait and hear what everyone else says, but then if you are ready, I am happy to make a recommendation.
thank you, Ian. Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. Just clarifying that if we say no, they can come back free with a second free go again, can they? So
There are, the regulations have been changed. There is no free resubmissions for planning applications. There's no charge for listed building applications still, but there would be a charge for any resubmitted planning application.
Okay, thanks, Peter, for getting that one clarified. Who's next? Oh, Councillor Ragg.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I have to say I support the comments made by Councillor Barlow, which might surprise him. I think that Historic England have made us a strong case. All right, there's no second go, no free go. But if we refuse this, then the applicant has the option of going to appeal. So there it could be properly tested. As it is, there are there's some information here over the statement, or you know, the allegation that nearby hotels, Harbour Hotel and Victoria Hotel, were grade 2 and grade 1 listed. Apparently that's not the case. I think the viability, future viability as a venue seems to be somewhat speculative, the amount of money, revenue that would engender. So I think, you know, we have professional planning officers' advice, reinforced substantially by Historic England. And as I've said, the applicant, if this is refused, has the option to go to appeal, where it can be quite robustly tested, I would have thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we should make it clear we do have huge sympathy for this and do understand the issue of historic buildings and the works that are needed. And, you know, we have had other applications where those things are linked. And I think there are just too many issues at present with this application, but it's not impossible that a new application could come back with different proposals with the information that's required, and we would be absolutely delighted, I'm sure, to be able to recommend approval of that one. Councillor Barlow again.
Just a question about the listed building. You get free application for a listed building, is that correct? And if so, could they just put in a listed building to test the water, and then if it was successful, then go in for the planning after that, that they then have to pay for, but knowing they're not wasting money?
The listed building application would only be looking at the physical alterations. It wouldn't be going into some of the matters of principle, etc. So, for example, we'd only be looking purely at the heritage issues, not looking at any of the other issues. So it wouldn't be appropriate for this to come in just as a listed building. It would need to come in, as it has been in this instance, a full and a listed building application together. It is, sorry, just following on from that, there is obviously the opportunity to follow up with pre-application, you know, to use that as a process for exploring options and coming up with a proposal that hopefully, you know, officers, you know, our officers and Historic England may be able to support. It doesn't have to go straight back to a formal resubmission. And in fact, that's what I think, you know, as officers, we would recommend.
And we'd happy to support that.
The submission of a pre-application, we would support the submission of a pre-application. Yes, I couldn't say whether we support, you know, because it depends what's in that pre-application. But I think with such a complex site and with such complex issues, it would be, you know, the best forum really for being able to sort of go to and fro and actually decide, hopefully on a suitable solution for the site.
I think as Jill has done in her report, this needs to kind of go through point by point and ensure that all the difficulties are answered, doesn't it? And that we don't just kind of put in a blanket kind of assertion and hope that it covers all the issues. Any further speakers? Councillor Howe.
Yeah, I have to concur with our officers. You know, it is rare we have an application with so many reasons for refusal due to lack of information, legal agreements, drawings even, the fundamentals of an application that have to be provided. You don't wait until you demolish a building, you know what you're going to demolish, and then you put the drawings in to show the results you need. You know, we just couldn't, in our hearts, as much as we want to see the building, quite rightly, as Councillor Barlow has said, we want to see the building preserved, we want to see it developed best way possible for, you know, the future, but this at present is not sufficient, unfortunately, and has to be rejected.
Okay, thank you. Do we have, yeah, Councillor Colin Brown.
Yeah, I mean, it might be helpful if he was to join historic houses, because they would help him through the planning process. And I don't think they've ever been approached so far.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Right. Sorry, we can't have dialogue between members of the public and the committee. I understand the strong feelings that you have, but you know, okay, sorry. Okay, I'm going to have to ask you to leave in a minute if you can't resist. Okay, so if there's no further speakers, I think Councillor Barlow, you're ready to make a recommendation.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. Regrettably, and I guess, as I said, I have every sympathy with the owner and with the ladies that put this in, but I will have to recommend that we go with refusal as per officer recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Haggerty?
Yes, I second that.
Okay, so that's... Yeah.
I've listened to Councillor Barlow, Councillor Ragg. I don't think there's any reason to go the other way, and I too agree with the officer's decision. So I would second this.
Yeah, we do sometimes have ones that are a bit more nuanced, but there's just too much stacked against this one, unfortunately. Okay, so we have a proposer and seconder for refusal. So I will ask all those in favour to raise their hand. And that's unanimous. And I'm very sorry, but you've got the officer's report. We've done our best, and I can only suggest that you have another go. Yeah, we understand all that, but you need to come to this committee. We have to follow procedure and regulation. We cannot go against the advice that we've received. Sorry, this is pretty much unprecedented. We have not had arguments with members of the public, and I understand that you feel strongly, but you've had every opportunity to make your case. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And I think after that, we probably need a break. I've just looked at the next one and thought, no, we're going to need a break before that one. What have we got? Is it 10 past? Let's have 10 minutes. Is that enough for everybody? Yeah. Okay. Right, members, we better crack on before we get into a discussion about the archers up here. Okay, we'll move on to planning application 23-1897 MOUT. This is land northwest of Ottery Moor Lane, Honiton, pages 65 to 105 in your agenda pack. We've got Senior Development Control Officer, Charlie McCulloch, who's going to present the report on this one. So over to you, Charlie.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. So this application is before committee as it represents a departure from the local plan, being on land outside the defined built-up area boundary of Honiton. It seeks outline permission for up to 21 dwellings, including associated development, public open space, access roads, landscaping and drainage infrastructure. Means of access is to be considered at this stage, with all other matters reserved. The application site area has been amended since the original submission to include additional land forming part of the same field to allow for surface water attenuation measures. There's been one additional letter of representation received since the report was written, and that reiterates concerns regarding access and loss of hedgerow, and the other representations received are summarised in your report. So the site is to the northwest of the town centre, partially between the built-up area boundary and the A30. So I'm just outlining the built-up area boundary on the screen there. So you can see it adjoins it at its northeastern end. This development is more advanced now than you can see. That's the Mountbatten Mews development that's nearing completion. And the site boundaries are largely formed by native hedgerows with a tree belt there on the embankment to the A30, but that is outside of the site. So that's the site area outlined in red there, and it includes the access through from Ottery Moor Lane through the Mountbatten Mews development and crossing over Ottery Moor Lane at that point there. The site extends to approximately 1.4 hectares, and that alternative access route has been proposed due to concerns with the narrowness and lack of parting places on the existing access route, which is via Ottery Moor Lane there. So whilst outside of the built-up area boundary and a departure from the plan, it is sustainably located in accessibility terms to the town centre, and where, given the council's current 5-year housing land supply position, there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development as set out at para 11 of the NPPF. So this slide shows an indicative layout for the site, showing one way in which it could be developed, although this isn't for consideration, it's purely indicative. But it shows a row of properties, a mix of detached, semi-detached and a short terrace there. They would face northwest towards the A30, therefore providing amenity areas to the rear, afforded some protection by the properties themselves. At this southwest end of the site is the attenuation area for the drainage, and at the northeast end amenity open space provision. So this plan indicates the boundary treatments, and those boundary treatments include, or would be required to have an acoustic fence boundary along this side, inside the site, with the A30 to protect and mitigate against the noise impacts from the use of that road. So that it also includes a hedge on the inside of the fence, so on the site side. That was originally proposed on the outside, but landscape and ecology officers of the council felt it wouldn't flourish or survive there due to shading from both existing trees and the fence on the other side. In terms of landscape impact, it's considered to be acceptable. It's well related to the existing development in Honiton and is contained within the A30. In ecological terms, these are considered to be acceptable in principle, subject to conditions to secure mitigation and enhancement measures, and there would be a need for ongoing landscape and ecological management and control over lighting the site. A dormouse mitigation licence would also need to be separately sought from Natural England due to the loss of habitat proposed, where hedgerows would be removed. So this is an indicative site section to show the relationship between the site and the A30. Due to the proximity of the site to the A30, traffic noise would be a significant constraint. And planning policies, including local plan policies and those set out in the NPPF, seek to resist development that would result in unacceptable levels of harm from noise. In this case, the applicants provided a noise impact assessment and a subsequent addendum report, which have shown how those noise impacts could be mitigated. They include orienting all of the properties to face towards the A30, as I said previously, providing shielding to the private amenity spaces to the rear, the provision of a 2.2 metre acoustic barrier along that boundary with the A30, and the use of appropriate mechanical ventilation systems to enable windows and doors on the elevation facing the A30 to be kept shut. Subject to such measures being secured and to the design and layout brought forward at reserve matter stage, it is considered that appropriate internal amenity standards could be met. However, in relation to external amenity areas, so the gardens to the rear, the British Standard and World Health Organization guideline desirable levels could not be met. As members will see from the comments of National Highways, which is appended to your report, they do not object to the proposal, but they have raised specific concerns with regards to noise impact and the inability of the development to meet those aforementioned standards. Nevertheless, the industry guidance in the form of the professional practice guidance on planning and noise recognises that it is not always possible to achieve desirable noise levels, and that in such circumstances, development should be designed to achieve the lowest practicable noise levels in external areas. The measures proposed have been designed to show how this could be achieved. The Council's own environmental health officers, who we are reliant on for advice in these respects, have indicated that, subject to suitable mitigation measures, that significant adverse effects would not be anticipated. On this basis, and subject to conditions to secure provision of the acoustic barrier, a further noise impact assessment related to any reserve matters scheme, and which are contained in conditions 7 and 9 in your report, officers consider that noise impact concerns can be addressed. This shows the drainage layout for the site, so attenuation basin at the southwest end here with surface water drainage to here, and then attenuated flows via existing drainage infrastructure under the A30 to the other side at greenfield rates, so no increased runoff. Devon County Council, in their capacity as the lead local flood authority, have raised no objection to the proposal, subject to conditions to secure surface water management, and South West Water has raised no objection and have confirmed availability of foul drainage and mains water connections. Oops, sorry. So access is a matter to be considered now, and this shows how that is proposed to be delivered. As I mentioned earlier, due to the narrow nature of Ottery Moor Lane, and therefore the lack of potential for passing places and to provide dedicated and separated footway provision and lighting, it's proposed to bring the access through the existing site, and then there will be some hedgerow removal required either side of Ottery Moor Lane, and a priority access taken through there to the site. I'll mention in a minute about some of the concerns regarding that, but that is something that has been considered by Devon County Council and subject to provision of additional signage to make drivers aware of the appropriate route, and that the two spurs to Dairy Close, which are here and here, that those are no through roads, then Devon County Council have no objections in that respect. So we can see the axis again here. And so there is some level difference between the site and, the existing development on Mountbatten Mews and the application site. So there would be a sort of table formed here with ramping down to either side on Ottery Moor Lane to bring it up to that table level where the crossing point is proposed. So further details of how this would be technically achieved and the detailed design of it would be subject to a Section 278 agreement with Devon County Council as the Highways Authority. So, a series of photos here. So this is a view towards the site from Dairy Close, which is in the Mountbatten Mews development. And you can see in the corner of each of these photos where the photograph is taken from. So this is the west spur or the southwest spur to Dairy Close. And you can see it is adopted highway up to a certain point, and then beyond that, private drive serving the last few properties on each end. And there's been concerns raised by local residents with respect to the fact that they consider there isn't sufficient turning provision in here, and that delivery drivers, etc., and indeed residents themselves, if parking spaces are full, are required to reverse out into this area, and the impacts that might have on the use of the access proposed. That's the northeast or the east spur of Dairy Close, showing the view that way. That's just a shot to show you what the position of the proposed pedestrian access at the southwestern end of the site. That's a view across the site from the existing access, field access towards the southwest, and then again to the northeast from the same access point. These are some views down Ottery Moor Lane. This one is northeast and is towards, that's the neighbouring property closest to the site, Rogue's Roost. So these show the condition and narrowness of the existing Ottery Moor Lane. This is viewing the other way, south-west along Ottery Moor Lane. So you've got the existing Mountbatten Mews on the left-hand side of your screen and the application site on the right-hand side. There again, so this is close to where the junction is proposed. You can see this slightly higher level of Mountbatten Mews there. So there'll be a raised table here with sloping up Ottery Moor Lane to that on either side and across to the application site. And that's just a view to show the point where Ottery Moor Lane currently goes down to towards the site. So in terms of determining the application, it's a requirement of planning law that decisions are determined in accordance with the development plan unless material planning considerations indicate otherwise. You can see on the screen there the balance of issues. This site is not allocated for development in the current local plan and is located outside the built-up area boundary of the town, meaning that it would be contrary to Strategy 1 and 7 of the adopted local plan. However, whilst it lies outside the built-up area boundary, it immediately adjoins it and is closely related and within easy walking and cycling distance of the town centre and the services available therein. It therefore finds some support from Strategy 3 in that it represents sustainable development. Importantly, given the recent changes to the MPPF, the Council can no longer demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and as such, weight cannot be given to built-up area boundaries as a means of settlement constraint. This is a material consideration, as is the need to bolster housing supply and the presumption in favour of sustainable development as set out at Para 11 of the MPPF applies. And which says permission should only be refused where any adverse impact of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policy in the framework taken as a whole. The proposal would include 25% affordable housing provision, which, given that weight cannot be given to the built-up area boundaries, meets the requirement of Strategy 34. It has been assessed in relation to design, highways, trees, ecology, sustainability and amenity, and officers have concluded that the proposal would not result in significant harm. There would be some biodiversity benefits, but this application isn't subject to the statutory requirement of 10% net gain due to when it was submitted. There would be some provision of amenity open space which would be secured by the Section 106 agreement, and the proposal has been reviewed by all of the technical consultees, the Environment Agency, Devon County Council in their flood risk and highways capacity, South West Water and National Highways, as well as EDC's own landscape, tree, ecology and environmental health officers, with no objections in principle raised. The proposal would bring economic benefits from construction and ongoing support of local services, as well as SIL payments, and in social terms it would provide for affordable housing to help meet the Council's ongoing housing need. There would be some harm arising from the development of the site and the change to the character and appearance of it, but this is considered to be limited in extent. In addition, in amenity terms, the noise levels in external amenity areas are likely to exceed desirable levels. However, such harm could be minimised by conditions and would not clearly outweigh the benefits from the development. So the recommendation there is to approve subject to conditions as outlined in the committee report and completion of a Section 106 agreement. We'll just update members on a number of the conditions where there has been some proposed minor changes to them from the published report. So in terms of conditions 5, if members can see that within their report, it just seeks to clarify the wording of that and what it requires. So it just makes clear that the details of implementation and future maintenance of the maintenance strip, which is along the boundary with the A30, would be required, as would an arboricultural method statement for any works required to address the removal, retention and management of trees along that section. And in relation to condition 9, it just includes some wording in the after such details shall include the type, layout and positioning and length of any barrier, details of its finished appearance and of its ongoing maintenance. So it's just to clarify that there is a requirement for details of ongoing maintenance for the acoustic barrier. The agent, on behalf of the applicant, has also raised some questions about a number of the other conditions, and those have been discussed and agreed that certain changes would be appropriate. So those relate to condition 18, where the working hours referred to under D state a 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Hours for movements on Saturdays, and it's considered that would be appropriate to change that to 8 a.m. to align with another condition which controls working hours. The need for condition 10 has been queried, and that's been discussed with the district ecologist. Condition 10 requires details of the dormouse mitigation licence to be submitted, and it's considered it would be reasonable to remove that condition requirement because it's replicating another permitting regime. The applicant is already required to do that, so it's not necessary for us to require them to provide us with those details. And finally, in terms of condition 15, point F, again, that's considered to reiterate a requirement of other conditions. That deals with tree protection and management, and there are other conditions which address that. So 15F could be removed. So in the event members are minded to approve the application, we would request that those minor changes are delegated to officers in agreement with the chair and the vice chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Okay, we have 4 speakers on this one. So we'll start with Michael Applin. Oh, Stephen? Okay. Yeah? That's fine.
Before I start, can I just point out...
You'd like to switch the microphone on.
Before I start, can I point out an inaccuracy with one of your photos?
You can do this as
part of his time, can't I? Just give him an extra 30 seconds. You said that's where...
Mr. Applin,
if you just put the microphone on, and we'll no.
People can't hear you online, so if you just explain so it's transparent what you're saying, we'll give you a little bit more time to speak afterwards, if that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, I am pointing out an inaccuracy. That is where you're suggesting that the walkway will come through. That has nothing to do with where the site is. The actual site would be...
We can't hear you now. So.
That is where the...
Can you step down from the seat and then you don't injure yourself, please? Thank you very much.
I apologise that due to inaccuracies, so you saw where I was pointing, that is where the ramp is. It's very close to the bungalow there, not anywhere further back like that whatsoever. Okay, we have had 60 years plus of interest in the adjacent property. We have been there before it was truncated by the bypass, before the dairy was built. We were there after it had been demolished. We know the site very well. They are ancient banks and are defined and therefore have protection as such. So we were naive with the dairy site in not going into the reserved planning parts where the site was raised in places over 1.5 metres. And that is the only cause for there needing to be a raised ramp going across the road. So our naivety led to that, I'm afraid. However, that's causing the problem with it going across the road. And there are alternatives. There's at least 3 alternatives, one of which is that they could have put a dog leg in at the bottom and come through the existing gate, therefore not destroying so much of the natural habitat. And of course, natural habitat and ancient habitat cannot be just transferred. New habitat is always that. It starts at the microbe level and works its way up through. So we have the banks. Also, if it comes down through as suggested, that creates a straight line site. And straight lines tend to make people speed up. If you speed up going down that road, those 2 houses in particular, or any vehicles coming to and fro there, are far more likely to be an issue. Also, it would cut across the lane. The lane has obviously always been the primary route. And I would suggest maybe it should do, because that might slow people down. Another issue with it would be the flooding. So you've shown that there's a ramp.
To start winding up now, because you've had your 3 minutes.
Okay. So the drainage is a big issue. You've shown it as a ramp. You can see there the lane does not have ditches either side. The amount of ramp and the amount of runoff, as has been shown over the last day or 2, where we have now changing weather patterns, will be a big issue in the future. So I think there are alternatives which may be brought up. It's all down to money. Taylor Wimpey are not doing this for your benefit or the townspeople's benefit. They're doing it for the baseline profit. If they didn't have the site there, there is no way that they would be interested in that site whatsoever. It would cost too much money.
Okay,
and with that,
really
I will wind up. But
really
I
need
would,
to wind up.
I would say inaccuracies, definite inaccuracies, misleading.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we'll have Michael Applin, please. Could you just, thank you. You've turned the microphone off, now turn it back on again. That's needed anyway.
Got it. I won't do any polite intros because you'll score the time against me, so no polite intros. I'm here today to express my deep concern and outright opposition to the proposed new road junction, just 30 metres from my family home, Rogues Roost. I'm also very thankful for the 50+ citizens who wrote in objecting. I'm sure they would have welcomed the opportunity to speak. Firstly, to set the tone of can we do better, I want to draw your attention to my 89-year-old young mother's plight. Taylor Wimpey have not been a good neighbour. Their by design and risk-assessed siting of the excavated spoil mountain was totally unacceptable. The spoil mountain towered above her house, just 10 metres away. Years have been overlooked, vehicles reversing, bleep, 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 vehicle reversing, bleep, 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 was totally avoidable. There can be no accidents on a building site. This was by design. Deliberate, it was not an accident. Please look at the photographs. Wendy can explain those later, unfortunately. There are photographs provided. In healthcare, we have a maxim. Is this good enough for your mother? This quality measure ensures good practice. Would Taylor Wimpey executives do this to their mothers? Don't do it again, Taylor Wimpey. Let's make it better. Use the existing lane. This would avoid the ridiculous ramped junction. Ottery Moor Lane residents have the refuse lorry, recycling lorry, builders, merchants, HGVs, and recently an 8-wheeled concrete mixer lorry. No issues. The proposed site has been accessed by Anderton and Rowland's Fun Fair with their very long lorries and towed trailers. The circus has used the field and large tractors and agricultural harvesting equipment still access the field by existing gateways and the existing lane. Neighbour Bill Austin, a pillar of Honiton Carnival, builds the fantastic carnival float at Ottery Moor Farm. Bill is very unsure that the carnival float will be able to negotiate the ridiculous raised ramp and the 90-degree turn of the proposed new junction, and then also negotiate around all the park residents and visitors' cars through Dairy Close and Mountbatten Mews. Note, I emphasise Dairy Close. The sightlines to St Rita's on the existing lane are good. The Sportsfield banks past St Rita's have not been maintained. There always used to be a ditch. Working with good neighbours, Mountbatten Park Recreation, this is easily restored and improved. I offer that these were military fields. They were never agricultural fields. The hedges were burnt. They never had any hedge trimming machinery in those fields. The hedges were maintained by Mr. Coombs, the groundsman, by burning. They are not ancient banks. Please think of the road past Coombe Garden Centre to Gittisham. This is a single track road and much larger than the point of access to the proposed site in length. I've measured this comparable road width. Gittisham Coombe Gardens Road is 3.9 metres at its narrowest. Ottery Moor Lane past St Rita's is 4.1 metres, including the block ditch verge. The vehicle footfall for Coombe Gardens and Gittisham is far in excess of the proposed 21 houses. The win-win is Ottery Moor Lane and Mountbatten Park improvements, a cleaner and, if felt necessary, lit lane for its users, and the potential for removal of restricted sightlines on a corner. This would make it safer for everyone, not least the young sports boys and girls.
I need to ask you to wind up
One
now.
paragraph. The next win is for the residents of Dairy Close, note Close, who were not informed of Taylor Wimpey's speculative intent when they purchased their homes. For most, the dream new home is a lifetime savings and mortgage commitment. Dairy Close houses were premium priced, with it being a close. The proposed access through the ancient banks will ensure inconvenience and devaluation of their homes. They will be caged in with security fences, and construction vehicles will ensure mums with pushchairs will need wellies. All totally avoidable, Taylor Wimpey. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay, we now hear from the agent, Samantha Thomas. You also have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, members. As you've heard, I'm Samantha Thomas from Carney Sweeney Planning, acting as planning agent for the applicant, Taylor Wimpey. And we're actually very pleased to be here before you finally. This application was originally submitted in August 2023. And during that time, we've had 2 updates to the National Planning Policy Framework. We've gone full circle in terms of principle and the application of the presumption of favour of sustainable development. And importantly, we have had the site endorsed for allocation in the emerging local plan by our own strategic planning committee. During this time, we've not been idle. We've been working hard to address various technical issues, and we're grateful to your officers for the opportunity to do so. During the course of the application, as you've heard, the red line has been extended to provide a greater level of on-site open space, improve sustainable drainage, and a higher level of on-site B&G, all of which has improved the scheme. We've submitted additional technical information to satisfy comments from the lead local flood authority, the ecologist, and the landscape architect. Our relevant consultees are satisfied that the site can be adequately drained. We can address noise through identified mitigation measures. Ecology impacts can be mitigated, and we can provide a BNG gain of just over 10% for habitats and hedgerows. And we can also achieve an acceptable landscape strategy. The application is in outline, but there are no technical objections remaining to the illustrative proposals. We do note the lingering comments of National Highways, who are commenting as landowners rather than Highways Authority. But as you've heard, our noise consultant confirms we are within the relevant guidance to achieve the lowest noise levels possible, and your own environmental health officer has not raised any objections. From the outset, we have not had any highway objections to the proposed access arrangements via the adjacent site. We of course note the Town Council and third-party objections, which are not unexpected, and we acknowledge the value placed on the site as undeveloped land and on Ottery Moor Lane for walking, but the scheme can retain and enhance boundary landscaping and is not proposing to increase traffic along Ottery Moor Lane, nor will it restrict access along Ottery Moor Lane for existing users. Pedestrian and cycle access will also be provided through the site, which is not currently available. Honiton is a natural focal point for future growth, and this is a highly sustainable site, well related to the town and its facilities, making best use of land and without any heritage or national landscape impacts. Being a small site, it will be able to deliver quickly to provide a modest but nonetheless important contribution to housing supply and provide much needed new homes, including 6 new affordable homes. Against a national housing crisis and acknowledge local housing shortfall, clear direction from government to boost housing delivery, your own emerging local plan and allocation, and the recommendation of Mr Freeman to Strategic Planning Committee in December to convert emerging allocations to permissions, there's no reason the site cannot come forward now. So we therefore hope members will support the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very well timed. Okay, thank you. Okay, and finally, the ward member, Councillor Roy Collins. Do you want to speak from there, Roy, or come up to the lectern?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I got the sale particulars of this site in 1923 when Honiton Manor sold it. In 1970 or late 60s, the Land Commission, which the Labour government had, they compulsory purchased all this land, all the industrial land around Express Dairy. That was purchased for industry. They only paid John Sluggett £30,000 for the land at the time, which was very wrong. And it's very, very wrong of this council to allow houses to be built there when it was purchased for a pittance for industry. None of this land should be built on. I've been out to Dairy Close and these other places, and it looks horrible, all those new houses that Taylor Wimpey have built. I'd have liked to see a lot more houses there, made better use of the land. Now, the site you're talking about, it was approved for development at strategic planning in September, which I did support. But these plans that Taylor Wimpey come up with are dreadful. And the residents at Rugel's Roost, well, to put a big heap of spoil and block all their windows of their view. Ridiculous. Now, they mentioned about drainage. There are 2 sewage outfalls at Ottery Moor Lane on the site there, and they regularly flow out sewage. It runs out down across the slip road and then down under the flyover down to Smiley's Picnic area. It's still happening. The water's coming out there this morning. I come down the slip road. The drains are blocked. They've washed out. It's Turk's Head Lane. You keep calling Ottery Moor Lane down there, that narrow lane. Turk's Head Lane is in a dreadful state out there, and where all the water washes out. You can't drive a vehicle out through there. 4-wheel ones go down over the bank. These drainage issues, I don't believe, are sorted out. I've had a lot of interest out there since I've been on this council the last couple of years. I go out there regular. The youth football use the Catholic Church pitches. One of their concerns, they can't park anywhere. This site out the end where they're showing grass, that ought to be a parking area for the youngsters so that they can park there. Also, I find a lot of dog walkers using these narrow lanes because vehicles can't get through there very well. It's very, very popular for dog walkers. Where are the dog walkers going to go? No, it's just not right. I hope the committee will turn down these plans. The land could be developed sensibly, but not what they're showing us today. So please turn it down. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Collins. I'll just remind committee this is an outline application, so at the moment we don't have details of the layout, which Councillor Collins has raised. And also point out we can't particularly consider historic issues that have arisen with the site or the problems that Taylor Wimpey have caused some of the residents with their existing development. So we have to look at this application on its own merits. Okay, do we have any questions for the planning officer or possibly the agent? Councillor Barlow.
Just a question that was brought up about the flooding in the lane. Because there are no ditches on the side of it, have we taken that into consideration? Because that does seem a fairly standard thing, that if you are raising it and creating technically a dam and the water then goes down it, is that going to be an issue? Have we thought that through? Are we happy that we have made provision for the water to escape somewhere?
So yes, there is a surface water drainage strategy that's been submitted for the site itself. With regards to the ramping and on Ottery Moor Lane there, as I mentioned, that would need to have a Section 278 agreement with the Highways Authority for the technical details of how that would be provided. And as part of that, it would be expected that the drainage and how the changes to the road would be drained would be picked up.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good question and thanks for the answer. Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. So what we're talking about is basically access, and what consideration has been made about access onto the opposite end of the site to Ottery Moor Lane?
Well, the applicant has brought forward the proposed access route. That's been considered by officers and by the Highways Authority to be acceptable. So we haven't asked them to look at alternative access proposals because the advice we have is that this is acceptable in Highways terms.
And that would be access through the existing site of Mountbatten Close, is it, and Dairy Close, leading on from that on to Ottery Moor Lane, rather than using the full extent of Ottery Moor Lane.
That's right, Chair.
Yeah. And on that subject of access, we've seen where vehicle access is going to be provided. We've seen where pedestrian access is going to be provided. I'm going to ask if there's any cycle access, because looking at that lane, it doesn't look to me as though there's even space for a bike and a car to pass each other. So I'm just wondering whether there's going to be any cycle access.
So yes, that's meant to be at that end of the site there where you can see the photo and sorry, you can't see the arrow where it's taken from, but that's access there, as I will show on the indicative layout. That is where there's proposed pedestrian and cycle access, so they would both use the existing Ottery Moor Lane, which would, due to the highways access for vehicles, would be relatively car-free, although it would continue to serve Rogues Roost and its neighbour.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was interested in this as well because there is a byways open to all traffic classification on this bit, and actually it continues all the way through, and I wanted to ask whether we could potentially use the 106 mechanism to try and commit Taylor Wimpey to improving access so that residents wanting to get into the town didn't have to come back onto the main road, that they could use that and then connect up with neighbouring streets to make their journey into town more pleasant and improve cycling access as well.
Yeah, I don't know if we can do that as part of this application, can we, Charlie?
I'm not entirely sure what the councillor is asking in terms of an alternative pedestrian route.
I think it's just improving because currently the path runs and connects with Oakley. It gets to the end of Ottermore Lane and then deteriorates as a lane. Sorry, that's what I'm looking at here. And then connects back into here.
Okay, yep. If I just point out on the screen, I think we're talking about up in this area here.
Yes.
To provide additional or
better reinforced.
Reinforce the, and that, I think you've said that that's is it a current footpath?
But yeah, byways open to all traffic
Yeah.
as it's classified currently.
I suppose it'd be a question of whether it's reasonable to do that for the size of the development, and given that there are alternative pedestrian routes through to the town centre, which in themselves are accessible and result in a relatively short pedestrian journey. There would be no, the applicant could be asked, but I'm not sure that for the size of the development, it would be necessarily reasonable to require those sort of improvements when there are alternative access routes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Faith.
Thank you, Chair. So the removal of the hedge, do we really need to take such a vast amount out of there? And also, the other question is, when we're measuring the distance from here to Honiton High Street, well, Honiton High Street starts right at the bottom, this side of the Gisage. But what part are we measuring to as far as, you know, do we measure to the town centre? Do we measure to the first shop we come to? How do you measure distance? Because I think it's quite a long walk by the time you've gone all the way from there.
Well, I haven't provided you today with a specific distance to the town centre. It's just that the town centre is considered to be within walking distance. I can measure it on a map for you if you like and give you a figure, but this is apart from redeveloping a site in the town centre, this is pretty much as close as you can get for a greenfield site to the town centre.
I think looking at Google Maps, Peter, it looks less than a kilometre to me into the town centre. Oh, it's a very long high street, Honiton, isn't it? Okay, Councillor Barlow.
Going on what was said about this other access into the town, and is it right that we should do it? Does it have to cross the river there, or is that not necessary? Is there going to be no? So is that too far? And can we ask the applicant if that is a possibility while we're here? I mean, we are trying to look at the balance here, and while I accept that the tilted balance is in play, we still need to make sure that it is, you know, you're putting people questionably with the noise, etc. But if we can make life easier in other ways, then that helps with the tilted balance.
We're talking about the proposed enhancement of the existing access via Oakley, and whether we can ask the applicant whether that's something that they can, yeah. Well, we can certainly ask them, as I say. If it is just proposed to serve or come off the back of this development, it's questionable whether that would be, depending on the costs of doing it, whether it would be reasonable for that size of development. But we can ask them if they're happy to respond, or their agent.
Okay, thank you. So there is an existing pedestrian access, is there, from, what's it, the end of Ottery Moor Lane, or from Dairy Close? From Ottery Moor Lane. I think I can see it on Google Maps here, and that joins on to the end of Oakley Close, does it?
Yeah, it comes out here. And
No, that's what I'm thinking, if it's an existing access. Obviously, it's perhaps a pity it wasn't done as part of the Mountbatten Close development, but we have to just consider it as part of this one. And yeah, I take Charlie's point that as we're only looking at about 21 houses, it may be difficult to ask for enhancements there.
Chair, can I just clarify? Obviously, if there's any third-party land involved in that, then that would be a different matter, because the applicant wouldn't have any control over providing that. So if it's enhancements to an existing route, maybe resurfacing it or something of that nature, then that would be one thing. But if it's involving third-party land, which the applicant has no control over, then that would be a different matter.
Sorry, I thought it was a byway.
Yeah, I think Simon's saying that there could be an alternative route, but maybe if we just stick to enhancing the current access, as long as it gives access to Oakley Close, or Oakley, I think it's just called, that would then provide hopefully a walking route from there towards the town centre. Okay, sorry, Roy, we can't take. Yeah, I know you would, but we can't take members from outside the committee at planning. So you needed. Okay, well, if it's information.
The river crossing. There's a riverside. When Oakley was built, there was a riverside walk, and it connected down to Ottrimore Lane to the very end there, down by the bypass. It came up through and it crossed the River Grish behind the old cinema, which is now the Donkey Sanctuary building. The footbridge there was put in about 5 years ago. East Devon Council took the bridge away. Honiton Town Council has been trying very hard to get the bridge reinstated. Maybe you could get the developers to pay for a new bridge there. Thank you.
I think we're moving even further from the current development. It's a nice idea, Roy, but again, I think perhaps it should have been conditioned as part of the previous development rather than this one. Wendy.
Sorry, I was just sort of discussing with the case officer. I think the challenges with what's being proposed is that the works are outside of the application site boundary as it stands. If it was entirely within the highway land, it is something that potentially could be delivered by a 278. But I think at this stage, there's quite a lot of uncertainty about land ownership, what's actually required to deliver it. And the other aspect of if it was going to be a legal agreement, it would need to be necessary to make the development acceptable. And whilst I can understand it's desirable and increased pedestrian permeability and cycle permeability is always desirable, I think the officer view is it isn't necessary to make it acceptable because there is a pedestrian cycle link route available which is convenient enough to provide access to the town centre. However, if members are, wanting to allow the potential for this to be explored further, we could require that as part of the reserved matters application for layout, that full details are provided of pedestrian and cycle links into Honiton Town Centre. We obviously know that one of them is already proposed, but it would enable a mechanism for us to be able to, at reserved matters, explore whether or not that alternative link could be delivered or not. That's what I would propose if members felt that it was important and they wanted to see that we made best endeavours to deliver it if it's practical to do so.
Okay, thank you. I don't know, did we answer Peter's question about removal of hedgerow Could you just specify which hedgerow is, or what removal of hedgerow is anticipated as part of this application, Charlie, please?
Yes. Yes, Chair. I'm just trying to get up a appropriate photo there, which will show us. So it is just the sections where the access would be punched through. There'll obviously be a need to remove hedgerow either side. If I show the photo that we have showing the access route. So it's those sections there where the access is going to come through. And I'll just take you back to this photo here, which Mr. Applin raised earlier. And I don't believe I did, but if I did mislay or misguide committee, that wasn't my intention. This was just showing that it's a clear point here where you can see the houses and where you can see the lane, and you can see the application site on the other side. So the access would come down between those houses and cross further down here. It's not where you see this section of hedge here, section of fence, sorry. But yes, there would be a requirement to remove a section of this hedge and this hedge, but only sufficient so as to provide access and visibility through to the site.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jenny Brown.
Thank you. Didn't the existing, or the speaker before say there was an existing gate that you could actually go through rather than taking out hedgerow? And second question, say 25% affordable. Do you mean affordable or social housing?
It's always I don't know what well, affordable usually includes some social, doesn't it? It's usually some for market rent and some for, some for affordable rent and some for affordable marketing. I don't know, what is the proportion here? Have we got a proportion? Probably that will come back at reserve matters, won't it? No. Yeah.
Chair, yes, the mix of affordable housing would be negotiated as part of the Section 106, but we'd certainly be seeking the usual split between social rented and shared ownership. I think it's set out in the committee report.
70% rented.
Which is
the rented
usual sort of ratio. Yeah.
So just for members, that's 70% rented accommodation, 30% affordable home ownership, with the rented being for social rent.
So it is, 70% social of the, obviously of the 25% affordable that would be provided here. Okay, any more questions? Simon?
Yes, I couldn't find any reference to any conversations that have been had with Honiton Football Club, obviously neighbouring land, and I was just interested, especially as we labelled Honiton as in dire need of more youth provision, and whether support could be given either with financial payment or other means to support that, considering that our need and our identified need at the council for extra space and support.
Yeah, I think once again Wendy would say that depends on it being required to make the site acceptable. I mean, I'm sure we'd love to ask the developers to provide all sorts of things, but I'll get Wendy to confirm that.
Yeah, unfortunately, on this particular site, there's no policy requirement that would enable us to require an off-site, a contribution towards sports provision off-site. However, the development will be SIL liable, and those SIL payments can be used for delivering that type of infrastructure. And I think Mr. McCulloch was just about to demonstrate the location of the existing field gate, just to explain why it's not being proposed as the sort of the principal access, because it would rely on traffic having to travel up and down Ottery Moor Lane, which has been deemed to be undesirable because of its width.
Yeah, so the existing access into the field is around this area, so that you would still be required to use a section of Ottery Moor Lane. Either if you were coming through the Mountbatten Mews, it would require a 90-degree turn onto Ottery Moor Lane, which the radii wouldn't really allow for, or you would be using the existing section of Ottery Moor Lane, and then having to turn into the site. Again, you would probably have difficulties in achieving adequate radii, and you would still be using that for most of the access route.
Okay. Any further questions before we go into debate? No? Okay, good. Well, we can go into debate. Who'd like to start off? I mean, it seems to me that most of the potential issues with this have been addressed. That access looks very narrow, but it's proposed to go through from Dairy Close, I think it's called, straight across Ottery Moor Lane, so you wouldn't need to use the full length of it, which seems would be required, and there's no objection from highways, so I think the access issues have been sorted out, and I think we've heard from the officer that some of the flooding issues can be addressed as well. Councillor Barlow.
I agree with the officers, obviously. I take the point about the hedges, though. Builders are very good at, we're going in here, we'll put a swing shovel through 200 metres of it, and then we'll put some little trees back in. So I don't know if there's anything, should we be willing to accept this, that we can put in a proper sort of thing that 25 metres, no more, whatever is absolutely the minimum. And, you know, I just think that we should somehow mention that and put that in, because you're quite right, they've been there a long time, although someone did say they'd been burnt and therefore there was no goodness in them. But again, I don't quite understand that, but they've been there a long time, and removing them will, certainly it will help with the noise reduction for the houses in the dairy area. Won't help the others, obviously. But again, look, it's just wildlife, and I just think that we should just watch that, because it's very easy to remove 120 metres to get a splay, which you technically need, but on a little lane like that, I really don't think. It'd be better to put in some sleeping policemen to make sure they're slowing down as they go up to the ramp, so that perhaps we don't need to take out as much hedge. Otherwise, I take your comments. Everything seems to be done. It will come for us again for the more interesting bits, whereas this is just access to a field.
Yeah, take your point about that, because you're interrupting a potential wildlife corridor there as well, aren't you? And on both sides, unfortunately, but that's what's required to get through. Yeah. I think because we've already got a proposed access, I don't think they can go beyond what is proposed. I'm assuming that has measurements, Charlie, so we know exactly what size is proposed. Yeah, the splay will have been required by Devon County.
Yes, Chair. So the access point is to be determined at this stage. We could add to one or more of the conditions to be more specific about requiring details of the extent of hedgerow to be retained and protection measures for that retention. If members considered that was necessary, we can certainly bolster the conditions we've proposed.
Yeah, I think that would be good, actually. I'd kind of assumed that we had a plan which specified the exact width of the road that would be punched through and the exact amount of hedgerow that's to be removed, but if not, I think we should absolutely condition that so that it is the absolute minimum that's required. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Smith, did you want to come back on something? Okay. Yeah, Councillor Brian Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Overall, I consider this to be acceptable, even though it's got a few, let's say, not perfect elements to it. Would it be possible, bearing in mind the proximity of the A30, that all forward-facing windows and doors that are facing the A30 could be triple glazed to cut down the sound? Thank you, Chair.
Yes, that is as part of the noise impact assessment and the addendum report that the applicant has provided. That is a suggestion that there would be particular measures on the A30 facing elevation to minimise noise, and that would also be subject to building regulations, but they would certainly consider measures such as that to reduce internal noise levels to an acceptable degree. And the information we have and that our environmental health officers have considered show that internal levels can be brought to normal standards. Yeah, as I say, as part of, there is a condition proposed which requires them to do a further noise impact assessment, which would be based on the layout brought forward at reserve matter stage. And as part of that, they would need to set out the measures that they would need to provide to bring internal noise levels down to an acceptable level. That might well include triple glazing, but I don't think it's something we can be prescriptive on from a planning point of view. It would need to be building regs, and there may be other ways which they can achieve it. And it's all about getting appropriate and acceptable noise levels within the properties.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. Going along those sort of lines, I mean, the plan just shows a few token trees along the side, and can we be, I mean, I'd want to see, we're wanting to put more trees anyway, right across East Devon. Can we see it more densely planted out along there? That would increase an element of
I think the landscaping will come back at reserve matters, Peter, so that's when we could ensure.
The other point is about, I don't know how much, with the change in the road, how much, is there any reason why the road needs to stay open for traffic or just pedestrians and cycleways to the west of that junction, so that you don't need to have such a splay area. Because there's nothing to go into there. So I would like to see that substantially reduced. Anyway.
Well, I think there might be other reasons for that still being an access, and that may be required for other properties or something like that.
If Councillor Faithful, could you just run that by me again, what your proposal was?
About Altrincham Lane.
Yep.
To the west of that junction, why does it need to be open to traffic when you've got all the new junction going through the dairy? If you haven't got traffic going there, you don't need the splay area because there's no traffic coming, only cycles and pedestrians, so you don't need to take anywhere near so much hedgerow out.
I think that's because that would continue to serve as the access route to Rogues Roost and its neighbour to the north. So there would be and delivery vehicles, etc., to those units. So there would still be traffic going through there, coming from the west, but this is about reducing that traffic or not increasing it, and providing an acceptable alternative route for the increase in the amount of traffic that this development would generate. But yes, Ottery Moor Lane would still remain open to use because it's still serving neighbouring properties, existing residential properties to the northeast.
Thank you. Yeah, that's kind of what I suspected. It's a pity because I wondered if it was possible to barrier off the lane, and that would then make it cycle and pedestrian only. Okay. Any other comments from members? We're all very quiet today. I know it's the first one after Christmas, but we've had long enough to wake up. Councillor Gazzard.
Thank you, Chair. Before I speak, can I just declare an interest, as I found out earlier, that I know one of the objectors who used to be a colleague of mine, but I've come here, I haven't been round to his for tea or gone to any weddings like that with him. Just for openness and clarity, transparency, to declare that I know one of the applicants from former working. So I've forgotten what I was going to say now. Oh yeah, I mean, there's forwards and against in this application, in my view. But my question is, tilted balance. Sorry, is it okay to carry
Damien.
Well, I just wanted to clarify, just for the record. So it's in effect NRI, so you're saying that you know the person. So which person is it that you're saying you know?
Yeah,
the objector.
It's Michael Applin.
Right, but not to the extent that you think that it would cloud your judgment?
No.
Okay, no, that's an effects NRI then, thank you.
Thank you. We're back in the realms of tilted balance, aren't we, because of our lack of 5-year land supply. I don't like it, but there we are. So are we supposed to then give more weight to that now in regards to planning applications like this? Because I would make an assumption, and could be wrong, is that if it gets refused, they can appeal and it'd probably be held up at appeal. I'm just, for clarity, want to, in my own mind, to know what weight do we have to give to the tilted balance now?
Yeah, I'll get Charlie or Mrs. Ormsby to answer that, but I think the tilted balance doesn't weigh particularly heavily here, because I think possibly would have been acceptable even without the tilted balance, but I'll let the officers comment on that one.
Thank you. Yes, the tilted balance certainly does apply here, because our 5-year housing land supply is only 2.79 years. So yes, that is a material consideration that needs to be borne in mind, and which I think I was just providing members earlier with the relevant section of the NPPF, which refers to it. There we go. Wrong one. But it requires us to, unless there are significant issues or adverse impacts, then the tilted balance would weigh in favour of the development.
Yeah, because it is outside the built-up area boundary, isn't it? So that would have been where the tilted balance perhaps does make a difference. Councillor Barlow.
Are you ready for a proposal, Chair?
I think we probably are.
Then I will be happy.
Just looking around, but everybody is still awake.
Be happy to.
They're all thinking about lunch.
Propose as presented to us by the officers, subject to the completion of a 106, and with the new conditions that Charlie pointed out earlier. And if we could have that condition for the hedge to look at that, because I do think it's such a small lane. But if you listen to highways, they'll say we need 120 metres, where really it's, you know, put a police sleep. There must be another way of doing it rather than, and it will make it nicer for the people that live there as well, and the wildlife. So if we could do that, I would be happy to propose that. Thank you.
Yeah, so we just require details of the proposed visibility splay. Would that be the condition? Requiring the sort of minimum amount of removal of hedgerow and kind of minimum width for that.
So I think, so in terms of that condition, I think it's probably just worth us just double checking and going through the conditions, make sure we're not sort of repeating ourselves, that it isn't already covered. But if it isn't already covered, that the reserve matters application for landscaping shall require details of the amount of hedgerow to be retained and also hedgerow protection. I mean, I'm pretty sure there is actually already a tree protection plan in there. But the intention then when we're assessing that is to make sure that we're retaining as much as possibly can be, whilst allowing for the width of the road that will have been agreed as part of this proposal. And then just also to clarify that there was also a further condition which was suggested, requiring that at reserve matter stage for layout, details of pedestrian cycle links to and from the site into Honiton are detailed and agreed, so that we can explore whether it's possible to deliver that additional link or not.
And also, again, just on that point of the access to it, if it is possible in any way to look at other mitigating things on that road to slow the traffic, so that we don't then need the standard 120 metres or whatever it is splay, because it's a very little used road, and we're going to be putting splays in that probably aren't really necessary, other than a few cars a day that are going to the properties that are there already. But that, I'll leave that to you and the chair, obviously, for the way you're going to do it.
Presumably highways look at sort of speed possibilities on that road and would propose a splay kind of, you know, commensurate with that. I mean, condition 16 does say that no part of the development shall be commenced until the access and no through route sign have been provided and maintained in accordance with details that shall have been submitted to and approved by the local planning authority. Would that cover the requirement to make sure the access is kept to a minimum?
That condition, Chair, is to do with additional signage on the Mountbatten Mews side of the site, which the Highways Authority proposed to prevent or to make people aware that the spurs to it are no through roads. So I think we can wrap it up in a condition, but I'm not sure that existing one does that.
Okay. Yep, that's fine.
Just want to make it clear to members, though, that the details of access are being agreed as part of this outline planning application. So whilst we can look and make sure that the plans haven't sort of shown a much greater hedgerow loss than is actually needed, the actual splays and the widths and dimensions of the access into the site are agreed and won't. And if they're approved today, that's what it is. All we'd be looking at is making sure they haven't arbitrarily decided to just take out some extra hedge that's really not necessary when we could seek to retain it.
So the pictures you've got there, the ones showing the green splays, that's it. Okay, right. So in other words, there's no point in actually saying that we want less. No. Okay, thank you.
But that does show the specified width. And the condition would require that they about 50 metres. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Did we get as far as making a proposal? Oh, you did, and Brian seconded. Yes. Okay, thank you. So we have a proposer and seconder to approve the outline application with the details of the access, with a couple of extra conditions to ensure that that's kept to a minimum, and some other details. So if everybody's happy with that, then we'll go. All in favour? And any against? 2, 3. And any abstentions? 1. Okay. So that is carried, I think, Wendy?
Yes. Got
Yes.
someone missing out.
I was going to say, it's 12 of us.
Yeah,
we
it's
only
12 of
counted
us,
11.
so somebody's not commented out of the way.
Oh, okay. Should we just do that one again, just to make sure we've
So
got
everyone
everybody?
in favour, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 now.
8.
Yeah, 8.
Yeah.
There it is.
Okie doke.
And
One
against?
3, and abstentions.
1.
There we are. That's all good
the
now.
12.
The maths works.
Yeah.
Well done. I'm glad somebody's keeping the maths going. Okay. So shall we crack on to the next next one? Yeah. Okay. So this is item 10. We got Andrew's lined up. Great. Item 10, planning application 241787 FUL. This is land to the rear of Barn Mews, King Street, Honiton. That's on page 106 to 122 of your agenda. Thank you very much to the public speakers for your contributions. Thank you. We'll just let everybody out, I think, Andrew, and then we'll... Okay, let's go for it. Yeah, sorry. Yes, did say go for it, but I must have muttered it.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This application is before the committee because the recommendation is contrary to the view of one of the ward members. The proposal is for a single-storey, 2-bed dwelling. It's a site in the built-up area boundary of Honiton with easy access to all the local amenities. And given that it's suitably located, the main issues are whether the proposal would provide high-quality living conditions for future occupiers with regard to privacy and outlook, and whether the proposal would preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area. The site is at the rear of the High Street and 100 metres west of New Street. The access is from King Street, and all of the land on this map north of King Street is in the conservation area. The site is in part of the curtilage of Barn Mews, this building at the front, which is a recent development of 7 flats achieved by converting and extending this building. Access is via a passage alongside Barn Mews, which we'll see in one of the photos later. Near the front of the site, there's a stone building which has planning permission to be demolished, and we'll see that later as well. The proposal is for a single-storey, 2-bed dwelling, and as you can see, it fits tightly into the site there. There's a small amenity area and storage space for bins and bikes. There's no parking on site, but given its location, that's not a policy requirement. Looking at the conservation area, it's characterised by long, narrow burgage plots, and you can see that here in the 1970 map. And at the back here, where development has started to encroach on the previously undeveloped plots. Around the site, there's been more recent development, so we've got houses in here and along here, which has eroded the open character to some extent. Given the amount of development that's taken place, the space remaining on the application site takes on greater significance in terms of its contribution to the historic character and appearance of the area. So if the site is going to be developed, a high quality design that respects the character and appearance of the conservation area is very important. The proposed building would have an L-shaped form and a low monopitch zinc effect roof. These are uncharacteristic features of the area and do not complement the linear form and steeper dual-pitched roofs that dominate the surroundings. This would be detrimental to the character and appearance of the conservation area. Although public views would be limited, there was a recent decision in December last year in which the inspector, discussing a site at the rear of 9 Tiphill in Ottery St Mary, said that while there'd be very little public visibility of the proposal, there would be considerable visibility from neighbouring dwellings and commercial premises which enclose the appeal site to the north and west. The proposal would therefore have sufficient prominence to result in harm to the character and appearance of the conservation area. And the same is true in this case, if not more so, given the number of dwellings that overlook the site. Therefore, harm to the character and appearance of the conservation area can be given significant weight. Turning to living conditions, the floor area satisfies the nationally described space standard for a 2-bed, 3-person dwelling, but outlook and privacy also have to be to a high standard. The windows in the east and west elevations would be at high level, providing a restricted outlook. The outlook would also be restricted to the north, east and west by the close proximity to the boundary walls, which you can see on this site plan. The main outlook would be to the east from this living room and kitchen window, and the largest bedroom would have an outlook to the south. The outlook from these rooms would be acceptable. However, the smallest bedroom in the corner here would have a very poor outlook because both windows would be very close to the boundary walls in this corner. Privacy is also a very important requirement, and the following photographs show how compromised the site is in this respect. So here we have the access past Barn Mews, and you can see the stone building at the front of the site that would be demolished. This is further into the site, looking north to 98A High Street, which has a balcony and a window overlooking the site. There is possibly a extant permission to extend that, although it's not clear if that was commenced in time and whether it is still extant or not. Outlook in this direction from the windows on the north side would be very poor because of the proximity to the boundary wall, although as a consequence of being so close to the wall, there'd be very little opportunity for people to look in from the other direction, so privacy is acceptable in that direction. Looking to the south, we're looking at the back of Barn Mews. The stone building would be removed, so opening up views into the site. The south-facing bedroom window, this one here, would have an acceptable outlook, and privacy would also be acceptable because the distance is about 15 metres between the Barn Mews windows and that bedroom window. The outdoor amenity space, however, would be heavily overlooked. That's just another view showing you that end of Barn Mews. And swinging further around slightly, showing the other windows looking in that direction.
Excuse me, Chair. Would you mind speaking up a bit louder, please?
I'll bring the mic closer, yeah.
Yeah, just move it a bit closer, Andrew. It's always a bit tricky.
This shows the view to the east. The brick building is a two-storey dwelling. The first floor window is a bedroom. The rendered building is two flats, one above the other, with a living room and bedroom window overlooking the site. The distance between the windows in the east elevation of the proposed dwelling, serving the kitchen and living room, and these windows in the neighbouring building is 6.5 metres, which is far less than the 15 metres I mentioned just now looking to the south, and could be improved on with better design. Outlook in this direction would be acceptable because there's space between the windows and the boundary, but privacy levels would be very poor because of the overlooking from these windows. And the same is true of the open space. There's one more picture I should go back to. This is the view to the west, where there are 3 new dwellings, not yet occupied as far as I'm aware, but they have bedroom windows overlooking the site. They're 3 metres from the boundary. Because the proposed dwelling would be so close to this boundary, privacy levels would be acceptable, but they would, these windows would have a poor outlook facing onto this boundary wall. So summarising all of that, you can see that the red crosses indicate where the outlook or privacy is unacceptable. This can be improved upon. The proposal would provide poor living conditions below the expected standard. And we have made a suggestion as to how these problems could be overcome, but the agent has not taken that forward. In the view of officers, compromising on living conditions and causing harm to the conservation area is neither necessary on this site nor acceptable. With that in mind, the application is recommended for refusal. And this recommendation takes into account the current housing supply position, but paragraph 11D of the NPPF was amended in December 2024, and it's clear that good design is still important when the presumption in favour of sustainable development applies. In this instance, the benefits of delivering one dwelling in a sustainable location do not outweigh the harm to the conservation area or justify accepting low quality living conditions for future occupiers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we hear now from the agent, Mitchell Cooper. And you have 3 minutes, Mr. Cooper.
How you doing? Thank you for your time to discuss this project. And having read the report, I can confirm I fundamentally disagree with the planner's stance. The site is wasteland in the heart of the built-up area boundary, and a dwelling is a great use of the site. It does sit in the conservation area, yet the conservation team hasn't raised any objection and was willing to go with the planner's recommendation. If there was a major issue, surely they would have. It is a burgage plot, and most of them in the high street and behind the high street have been used for development, and you can see from the photos that you put up, very infill development right across the board. It has full support from the town council and no other objections raised from any neighbours in the area, which are in all those photos, obviously. We've had in-depth dialogue and tried to work proactively with the planner, but sadly we could not agree on this occasion. The proposed fits in well within the site in our view, and the monopitch roof has been designed to limit its height and avoid impact on the neighbours. MCA would not design something he felt would provide poor living conditions, and I'd actually move in it tomorrow, and I've actually asked him if I can buy it. The conservation area to the rear of the high street is high density housing with a mixture of designs. This is a more modern approach we feel will fit in well. MCA produced a document of many others in the area with terrible outlooks from windows, one actually within 500 mil of a stone wall knee high. I'm not sure any of the committee would have seen that document because it hasn't been uploaded online, but there's a long document of 5 in the area, all approved by East Devon. Far worse than this. The site has adequate amenity, natural light, and some people only have a Velux in their bedrooms in new build homes with an outlook of a blank sky. We've designed it with high level windows, so the view would be out over the stone walls and into the sky with rooftops and whatever. The planning officer has given massive weight to the conservation area. These are nearly all built on, and the conservation area again raised no comment. There is no constant design trend to the new homes in the conservation area. The report outlines other sites, and as before, I don't think the committee would have seen them. So in summary, the site is a great opportunity for a home in the built-up area boundary, which is much needed to Honiton. It's fully sustainable. It will become wasteland and a dumping ground again. My client cleaned it up when he purchased it. It was absolutely ransacked. It impacts on nobody in our view. I quite like the modern design, but again, that's personal opinion. It's a great use of a redundant site. We've met all the biodiversity net gain requirements, and that can be conditioned. I think my client would need to purchase some units from an online source. And again, feel it's a great use of the site, and I hope that the committee can support it. And if you have any questions, please fire away.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we go on to the ward member, Roy, Councillor Roy Collins. You can speak from the lectern or from over there if you like, Roy. Up to you.
I've been to this site. I went there last week, and the notice for the application is prominently displayed on the side of the pavement at King Street. People can see what's going to happen there, what's proposed, and I've talked to the neighbours, took the trouble to talk to the neighbours. They have no concerns at all, that they would be happy to see this site developed. When I walked into the site, it's full of rubbish. There's food waste in there and things. Obviously, other property, whether they're chucking it over or whether it's kids, I don't know. You can see, you haven't put the 4 pictures up. You can see by the pictures of, there's an old settee there and things. There's an old stone building in there, which is in a very dangerous state. The roof, you can see the slates are gone there, the tiles, and it's about to fall in. The wall that you're looking at, that's the only solid wall to the building. The gable end is gone, which has not been photographed. And the wall the other side is leaning, about to fall out. Now, if you could come on to photograph 3, please. You'll see that 3. The one where the concrete block wall is where they've been stoning it up. There. You can see there's a block wall gone up, and they've gone up so far with the stones. The tie bands are there in the wall. I should think they've probably used the gable end to build that wall up. Now, if you approve this, you ought to make a condition that the stone wall goes up. Now, the planning officer says about privacy and it's not suitable for that sort of thing, but you can put in oblique glass, or there is such a thing as curtains that people can use if you don't want someone looking in. All the buildings around that site, they all look very modern to me. I can't see what's to be conserved there. It doesn't look like a conservative site to me. No, I think I'd be happy to see that develop, definitely, and so would the neighbours. I just hope that you will approve it. And by the way, there's a bus stop, I suppose 50 yards away, railway station 100 yards away, library, or a large car park in New Street, one in King Street. You've got public toilets there, which hopefully will not close because the town council will take them over. And all the facilities are there. It seems ridiculous to turn it down and get this site tidied up. Well, thank you.
I hope you're not suggesting they don't even need a toilet in the building, Roy. Thank you. Okay, members, do we have any questions for starters? Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. Somewhere in all those reports was a comment that the land was somehow connected with the flats that are being built. What was its function? Is it supposed to be open space or something? Because they haven't got any now. They've got an awful lot of flats and no open space.
Yes, there were previous proposals which reserved that land as either amenity space for the flats or parking space. But there was a permission, a variation in 2022, which removed any requirement to use that land in conjunction with the flats. So it's available for development in that sense.
Well, I think it says somewhere it's still in the curtilage, doesn't it? It's still in the curtilage of the flats, I believe.
Yes, it's still in the curtilage.
Yeah. Councillor Collins did mention the demolition of the building, which is urgently required. That permission has already been granted in February. In February 2024 last year. So that has been done. So that's not a requirement of the approval of this application to ensure the demolition of that other building. Any other question? Oh, Councillor Wragg.
Yeah, it's in a conservation area, so I'm wondering why the conservation officer did not wish to comment and left it to the case officer. What's the point of having a conservation officer if you're not going to get advice from them?
Yeah, I wondered that one as well, Eileen. It could just be that they consider that the conservation area is so eroded in that part that there's probably not much point in trying to preserve the tiny little strip that's left. But do you want to comment on that one?
If I could just come back, no, it's nothing to do with the quality of the conservation area at all. I think it's still a very valid and worthwhile conservation area. It's just that on some occasions the conservation officers will take the view that they feel that the case officers themselves are competent and capable of making the assessment. We don't, sometimes, in most cases, to be fair, they will provide detailed comments, but on this occasion, they felt that they would leave it to the case officer. It's not an indication that they don't value this particular part of the conservation area.
Thank you, Chair. If I may come back, is that perhaps because there's so much infilling there that it's just taken for granted? And, you know, it seems a bit odd to me.
In previous cases where the conservation officer has been asked, where they've done the Berger plots, he's always been in favour of it. But this time he didn't comment. No. So he wasn't against it, but yeah, I suppose he got fed up with being asked.
That can say more than if he had commented through you, Chair.
I think in terms of the just following on in terms of this issue about the development of the Berger plots, I think it's, and what's in the officer report is there isn't necessarily an objection to the principle of developing this site. It's just acknowledging that because of the value that it does give, that one of the few remaining open parts, and because it's in the conservation area, that any development needs to be of a high quality. And I think that's the key aspect that the officer report brings out.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brian Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. This isn't so much a question as an observation, if I may. It's been mentioned that this is an open space area. Well, unless my eyes have really lost the plot, I mean, to me, it's a rubbish dump. There's no benefit in leaving it as it is, and no benefit in calling it an open space, because you couldn't go in there and have a walk around. You couldn't sit there in the evening and read your book and have a beer. There's no benefit to the immediate residents. I mean, to get into it, you have to climb over the wall, I guess. I haven't seen a proper entrance.
The requirement to make that an amenity area for the flats was removed in 2022, so that's why it's perhaps been left in the way it has.
So that makes it...
It's not considered to be an amenity area at present.
No, I agree with you there, yes. But looking at the pictures and looking at what the officer said earlier, it is being deemed as that, as some sort of point for not allowing it to be developed. And I can't agree with that.
No, I don't think that's the issue. It's not that it is required as an amenity space. It's more the amenity of potential residents. Councillor Howe.
Well, one, I'm just wondering if we're getting away from questions yet. But coming on to Councillor Bailey's point, we should be very careful about thinking a plot that is being used as a dumping ground means it ought to be developed, because then all of a sudden you haven't got any fields left, you've got a lovely tip all over the place, and that's the issue. You should never consider what it's being used as, by just throwing rubbish in it and a messy site. There are actually laws about messy sites that can make them be tidied up. So as far as we're concerned, it is an open space, end of story, and never go any other way on that.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Councillor Barlow.
Sorry, are we still on questions, or have we moved on? Because I'm waiting to debate.
Do we have any further questions? No. In that case, yeah, we're into debate.
Thank you, Chair. I looked at this. Sorry.
Jenny's the ward member.
It's not required, but sorry, Jenny, did you have your hand up? I wasn't sure if you were. I just wasn't sure if you were just holding your glasses up over. Right.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Having lived in Honiton for many years and delivered leaflets, it's amazing how many little back alleys there are that have got houses, affordable houses, ones that people can afford to buy. So this is just another one of those plots that would lend itself to being built on. The plan actually, or the house looks as though it fits in there. There's others that are so much worse, but that doesn't include this. But I think it actually fits in the plot very well, and I don't seem to have any problems with it.
Okay, I don't think there's an issue with the principle of development. It's whether it's if the design is sufficiently rigorous. But yeah, take that point. Councillor Barlow, then Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. I've looked at this for the last 2 nights, and I must admit I was rather surprised. The arguments for it's in a conservation area, and lots of the others are pitched roofs and 2-storey, etc., would only make it worse in my mind. If you put up a 2-storey or a pitched roof on that, it makes it worse for the people next door. It seems that they've given a lot of thought. And although the amenity space is going to be overlooked by the buildings, if you looked at the pictures of the other flats there, where those new houses have been built, they look right into the amenity area of the other properties. So if that's not that picture, you're not going to move it. No, not that one. The one you look down from the site, looking down towards the access onto the road. So there, so it's not even that one, but there is another one where it shows the amenity area of the blue building. Not that one. We will get there, I'm sure. It's not that. There we go. So the houses on the left-hand side, they'll look straight into that amenity area, which is exactly the same as the house you're going to be building. And the flats there have got no other amenity areas. That's one flat, flat 5, whatever, that has this amenity area there. The windows in the buildings that we've allowed, some of them don't have any windows in the bedrooms at all, where it's been converted. And I just think that we're saying that we need houses, we're saying we need affordable houses, and here is a small, affordable house in a sustainable, totally sustainable location, squeezed in, admittedly, but it makes the best of not upsetting the neighbours by a pitched roof that would cause them more light loss, whatever. And I just wonder why this isn't acceptable and how exactly you would make it that much better. You know, to me, the high-level windows allow light into a bedroom, and it is a bedroom. It's not like your front lounge where you're going to be sitting in it all the time. So I don't know about you, when I go in my bedroom, usually I draw the curtains because it's dark and I want to go to sleep. So to me, I think this is acceptable. I think it's a well-designed and exactly what people want. Living, kitchen area, it's got a bathroom, it's not big, it's going to be affordable, it's in an area where people can walk, they don't need a car, it's got no car parking, etc. It has got a small amenity area that, again, can be used. Some of the houses we're putting up on the new estates, again, you know, they're overlooked, but they're only from top windows. And again, we said before, people don't usually sit in their bedrooms staring out, looking at what people do. I know it can happen, but you're not going to stop that anyway in that site. So to me, I think this is acceptable, and I've agreed with officers for the first two, but I'm not going to agree with the officers on this one. So when you're ready, I would be happy to make a proposal unless someone else wants to do that first. Thank you.
We've got you lined up. Councillor Howe, then Councillor Wright.
Councillor Faithful first.
Oh, sorry, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I recall a planning application in Ottery, right smack in conservation area. It was more in conservation area with a whole stack of listed buildings alongside it, not unlike this design. And we refused it, and it went to appeal, and it went through on appeal because the officer didn't feel that where it was out of keeping, because it wasn't in the public open space where you would see it. And I feel that this is so much like that. In fact, it's almost less of that because it hasn't got so many. I'm not sure whether Honiton High Street there, but it's not so close proximity to so many listed buildings. So I think I will be struggling, despite my personal opinion on the style, to be able to stand against this because of where we went before with the buildings in Ottery, and that was a upside down house and very modern. It had frosted glass over the wall into next door's garden. It was more intrusive than I think what we're going to get with this. So I think I have to go with it on those grounds rather than any personal opinion. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Councillor Wragg.
Thank you, Chair. I'm concerned about the lowering of standards for the occupants, future occupants. When you think you're lowering the standard distance from 21 metres to 6.5 metres, all right, we know it's pretty cramped in that area. I recall, I think it was about within the last 2 years, previous application, not dissimilar to this, was refused. I can't remember which one it was, but I do know that the ward councillor, one of the ward councillors, was quite keen on it going ahead, but we did refuse it. As far as I know, that didn't come to appeal, or at least if it did, it hasn't happened. So I am concerned. What's gone before doesn't necessarily mean it's right, and I think if we lower that standard, then that could be used as a gauge for future development. And, you know, somebody could come back, an applicant could come back, say, well, you accepted that, why not mine? So because of that, you have to think of future occupants. Not all of them are spoilt for choice as to where they live. Yes, we need affordable housing, we need social housing badly, but there again, people will take what landlords have to offer very often. So I cannot support this application. I think we'd be lowering the standard 3-7, and I think it should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just make the point that this is not actually affordable housing. I mean, it may well be that without the parking and with the amount of amenity proposed, it wouldn't be a particularly expensive home, but it doesn't fit the definition of affordable housing. So we just need to be careful that we're not considering this as somehow affordable housing. No, I know you're not, Eileen. I just wanted to, just in case any members had in mind that this was some kind of affordable housing. Councillor Howe?
Yeah, and thank you, Councillor Ragg, for that comment, and I know actually exactly where she is. You know, the overlooking is pretty damn close here. You know, it really is 6 meters just over on nearly all sides. And that is really bad. It's you know, and you say about windows, no current neighbours objecting. It's future neighbours you've got to worry about. It's not. It's permanent, the changes we make, and you know it's quite clear you need to consider the impacts to the building, not the relevant people living there now. Especially as we think 3 of them aren't even occupied at this minute in time. It's really hard, but I cannot support this. I don't think the design is good enough. I think it can be improved, and I think things can be done better. It's not about the principle of development here. It is about the actual physical design and how good this is or not in this case.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. We've got a bit of a divergence of opinion here. I think Colin first and then Simon.
Right. I remember going on that site visit in Austria, and I suppose Mike should as well. It was a property that we actually looked down on. It was, you know, well, really bad, but that was approved by the inspector at the end of the day. But if we go back to Honiton, there's a number of these Berger plots where they've built on them. You know, one that comes to my mind, which I looked up, was the one behind NatWest Bank, 17/0809, where there was 5 units there, and they was built in front of a high stone wall. So you look straight out the window into a stone wall or brick-built wall. You know, far better, well, far worse than the one we're looking at today. The one today is in a, you know, better position. You know, there's no reason to approve it. We've got to be consistent in planning. All these other Berger plots have been built on in town. There's probably 2 sites that haven't been built on that will come eventually to planning. And they're Berger plots in the same as this. You know, we've got to be consistent. You know, if we done the one behind the wine bar, next to the butchers for 3 units, we've done this one behind the NatWest Bank for 5 units. This is only for 1. You know, consistency in planning, that's what we're always told. You know, why should we change it now? You know, I'm in favour of this one, as you can probably tell.
Thank you. Yeah, consistency, but not necessarily treating everything as a precedent. Okay, Councillor Smith.
I actually think we've got to be careful not to have a race to the bottom. I agree with Eileen and Mike here on this one. I think we have a responsibility on this committee to set a standard, and regardless of what's gone before us, we have a chance at every committee and every decision to set a precedent and to set a standard we believe, and when following our officers' advice as well. I think that's an opportunity we have here with this as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I must admit I've got a bit of a problem with this in that I think future buyers can consider whether the amenity is acceptable to them. At the same time, I take members' comments that the design and the officer that there could be better designs in this space. Okay, any members who haven't spoken before? No, okay, I think it's between Councillor Faithful and Councillor Barlow. I'll take Councillor Barlow first.
I was just going to point out that in 2280 variances, when they removed the gardens from the flats that this is now sat on, it stated that the loss of communal garden space is regrettable. However, no adopted standards for small sites such as this require gardens, etc. Although no access for any other flats other than 5, there are public parks within a short distance. This is considered sufficient to address policy D1. And the windows to the bedrooms there are obscured and shut and have no viewing out at all. So I just, again, going back to what we're allowing and what we're not allowing, we allowed them to remove the garden and the amenity space from this plot. Now, I take Simon's point that we want to set a standard, but we've removed this and allowed it then to be put basically for a building plot. And I just think that we're saying the amenity space is going to be overlooked, but there's no need to have an amenity space there for that property. The flats don't have an amenity space. So I just think that we're turning down an opportunity to put in a property, but I will listen and wait and see if someone actually proposes the officer's recommendation, and should that fail, I will have an alternative to put forward.
Okay, thank you.
Chair,
I think I had Councillor Faithful first, actually, Peter.
Well, these high-level windows is the only reason you'd be able to look in over the wall and into that room. If the windows weren't so high, then you wouldn't be able to look in through the windows, would you? Because the wall would be in the way.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ragg, and then
Yes, no proposal's been made. Chair, I propose refusal.
I think. Oh no, we haven't had a proposal. Yep. Wendy.
It was really just before you go to the vote, just to clarify a couple of things that have come, just listening to the debate that's come forward. So the reasons for refusal are not matters of principle. It's not in principle an objection to the loss of this space. It is, the reasons this is recommended for refusal are that the design is considered to be out of keeping with the conservation area, and I think potentially more importantly, the level of amenity space that would be offered to neighbours and to the future occupiers. And it isn't the overlooking so much of the amenity space, although that is an issue. It's the overlooking, it's the window-to-window distances. So in particular, the main lounge, which is the only one of the few windows that actually has any outlook, but the outlook that it does have will be quite compromised because of the very close proximity to neighbouring properties. So those are the reasons for refusal, and the officer has acknowledged that there potentially is a solution to this site. It's not saying that there should be no development here, just that this isn't the right solution for this site.
A question on that. So are we saying that, I mentioned, I read it through, and from memory there was about pitch roofs in this area was the thing that was important. Do you think that putting a pitch roof on this building would improve the neighbours either side, their views, etc., is that going to be an improvement in making it more in keeping with that area?
I don't think the answer is necessarily putting a pitched roof on this building. I think another design could come forward with a pitched roof. It would be taller, but I think that can be achieved without harming the amenity of anyone around the site.
Okay. Still got Councillor Ragg and then Councillor Smith, I think. And was it just Councillor Smith? I'm ticked whether
I
you've
think
spoken.
Councillor Ragg was just about to propose, but I noticed
Oh, yes,
that
you made a
Councillor
proposal.
Hegarty had his hand up, and if he wanted to say something before a proposal went in,
Okay.
still in debate.
Councillor Haggerty, Dell.
Thank you, Chair. So it's all about sit on the fence. I've lived in a conservation area in Torquay, and we had something similar to this. And when the people did move out, it did cause absolute war. So, and only in that reason of being in that position, as much as this, I like the place, I like what it does, but and I'm really looking on conservation. I can't support this particular. I'm sitting right on the fence at the moment, so that's where I sit with this one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith.
In that case, I will second Councillor Ragg's. I think, actually, I'd just like to encourage us as a committee. I think there's not very many forums where healthy debate takes place, and I think we've used debate really wisely in this committee here, there, and I've really enjoyed the committee's debating period just for this particular application as well. So, but I will second Councillor Ragg's.
We've had more debate on the smallest application
Often
all
the way.
day
Yeah.
than we had on all the other ones.
Could I just ask, presumably they don't get a free go to come back again, but the thing is, if it's refused, they have the option to go to appeal.
Yeah. Okay, so you're proposing refusal. That's seconded by Councillor Smith. And unless we have any further speakers, we can go to a vote then. So those in favour of refusal? And those again?
I thought I counted 7.
Oh,
Can we just do that again?
Try that again.
1,
Two here.
3, 4, 5, 6. Oh no, sorry, it's Councillor Fairfax like that. I've mistook that for a hand raise. Apologies.
Okay, and those against refusal? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh.
they're quite thin, actually.
Mike's the one with the broad shoulders, and I wish he was sitting in this position here. Well, if I've got the casting vote, I am always going to support the officers. So in that case, I will support refusal. I won't say always, but on this occasion, I'm going to support our officers, and that is generally my principle. Okay, so that one is narrowly refused.
I'll speak to him, said.
Yeah, can you? Well, I was just going to say, what time do you think he'll get here?
No idea. I haven't even spoke, but I think we said, shall we say 2:15? That'll be an extra 15 minutes.
Yep.
That'll be
So, yeah, we'll reconvene at 2:15, members. We've had a message that the objector to the next application is running a bit late. So sorry, Malcolm, but if we can, No, you're very punctual, but we'll commence at 2:15 in that case and hope that gives them sufficient time. Okay. See you at 2:15.